mountain had swallowed 2 girls whole 4 summers back, and Cora Alden was about to learn it had never once finished chewing. 63 years old, bad knees, a dead husband 8 winters in the ground, and a black and tan shepherd whose hackles rose like a warning flag as the October fog closed around them. Behind a curtain of moss no living soul had ever parted. Her lantern found a wall clawed with more than 1,000 tally marks, and 3 words scratched shaking into the stone. Cold. Help us, please. Then the silver locket in the dirt, a little bird with its wings spread, still catching light. Effie Barrow had been wearing it the day she vanished, and the ash in the fire ring was not 4 years cold, it was months. Somewhere under this same mountain, not 15 miles from where Elias slept in his grave, 2 girls were still counting days on a wall, and the deep snow was already coming down to shut the door. There is a special kind of grief that comes from not knowing. It settles into the bones. It does not leave. It hangs over a town like wood smoke that never lifts, like fog that forgets how to burn off in the morning sun. Cora Alden knew that grief. She had carried it for 4 years, so had everyone in Elkridge. 4 years. That was how long the 2 girls had been gone. Let me tell you about the mountains first, because you cannot understand Cora without understanding the country that made her. The Colorado high country in the autumn of 1884 was not a gentle place. It was a place of granite and silence, of pines that stood like black spears against a white sky, of wind that came down off the peaks with teeth in it, and creeks that ran cold enough to stop a man's heart if he fell in them wrong. The kind of country that swallowed men whole and never gave back so much as a boot. Cora had lived in it for 30 years. She was 63 now, small, weathered. Her hands were brown and knotted like the roots of an old cedar. Her hair had gone the color of iron and river ash, and she kept it braided down her back the way she had worn it since she was a girl in Missouri, before the war, before any of it. Her eyes were pale gray. They missed nothing. A hawk's eyes, Elias used to say. Eyes that could count the feathers on a jay across a whole meadow, and it was true. She had a way of seeing that other people did not have. A way of noticing, which was part of what made the guilt so heavy. But we will come to that. She lived alone in a cabin she and Elias had built with their own hands, log by log, stone by stone for the chimney. They had raised it in the summer of their 30th year, the 2 of them, with blistered palms and sunburned necks, and a joy so fierce it near about frightened her to remember it now. They had built it to last, and it had. It stood there still, snug against the mountain, with the smoke curling up out of the chimney they'd laid together, though only one of them was left to keep the fire. Elias was 8 years dead. A Sunday morning it had been. He was sitting on the porch with a cup of chicory coffee going cold at his elbow, watching the light come up over the ridge the way he liked to, the way he had done 10,000 mornings. And then he was not watching anything anymore. His heart had simply stopped. No warning, no fever, no long slow going that a body could prepare for. Just a good man in a chair, and then just a chair. Cora had found him. She had come out with the biscuits, 2 of them, one for each of them the way it always was, and she had stood there in the doorway with the plate in her hands, and she had known. Before she touched him, before she said his name, she had known the way you know weather. The stillness of him was a different stillness than sleep. She had set the plate down on the rail, careful, as if a sudden move might wake something that ought not wake. And then she had gone to him and put her hand on his cold cheek and said his name once. Just once. And the mountain had said nothing back. She still lived in the same cabin. She still walked the same trails. She still slept on her side of the bed and left his side smooth, because 30 years of habit does not die just because a man does. Sometimes in the deep of the night she would reach across without meaning to, and find the cold flat empty, and lie awake till dawn with her hands still stretched out into the dark. And she had the dog, Boone, a shepherd black and tan, 6 years old, with a chest like a barrel and eyes the color of good whiskey. Rachel had sent him. Rachel, her daughter, who lived 1,000 miles away in San Francisco now, married to a banker Cora had met exactly twice. The dog had come as a pup in a crate on the freight wagon 3 years back, with a note tied to the slats. The note said, "In case you get lonesome out there, Mother." As if a dog could stand in for a daughter. As if a crate on a wagon could carry an apology across 1,000 miles of distance neither of them knew how to close. And here was the bitter joke of it. The dog had worked. That was the thing Cora could never quite forgive. That her daughter, trying to fix a thing she did not understand, from a city Cora had never seen, had reached out blind across all that distance and put the one true comfort of Cora's late years into a crate. Not knowing, never knowing, that was the ache of it. Rachel had done the finest thing anyone had done for her in a decade, and had no earthly idea she'd done it. They wrote letters, Cora and Rachel, twice a year. Birthdays, the turning of the year. Cora would sit at the table with the lamp guttering and write 3 lines that said nothing, and Rachel would write 3 lines back that said nothing, and both of them would fold the nothing into an envelope and call it love. The fight had never been a fight. That was the trouble. A fight a body could fix. A fight had edges you could get your hands around. You could say the hard thing and then take it back. You could weep and be forgiven. This had no edges. Rachel wanted her mother down out of the mountains, in a city, in a bed with a roof that did not need chinking and walls that did not let the wind in. Somewhere a widow her age could grow old in comfort, near a doctor, near her only child. "You're hiding up there," Rachel had said, the last time they spoke face to face, 4 years ago now, near about. Standing in the yard with her traveling case already packed and the hired wagon waiting. "I'm not hiding," Cora had told her. "I'm home. You're punishing yourself," Rachel had said. "Since Papa died, you've turned into a ghost. You walk those trails like you're looking for something." And Cora had wanted to say, "Maybe I am. Maybe I am looking for something." But she had not said it, because she had not yet understood herself what it was. Rachel had looked at her a long moment, and then she had climbed up onto the wagon. And that was the last of it, face to face. 4 years of paper since. 4 years of nothing folded into envelopes. Home, Cora believed that word. She had bled for it. She had buried a husband in the ground behind the cabin for it. She knew every trail, and every spring that ran sweet in August, and every place where the elk yarded up when the snow got deep. She kept it all in a journal, a leather-bound thing, worn soft as a glove, that she had filled over the years with sketches and notes and small private truths she had never spoken aloud to a living soul. That journal was the closest thing she had to a confession, and to a friend if she was honest. She talked to it the way some folks talk to God. She put down the things she could not say to Amos over coffee, or to the women at the church she went to twice a year out of habit, or to the grave mound behind the house where her whole heart lay buried. And in the back of it, on pages she did not like to look at, she had written about the girls: Effie Barrow, Delia Hartwell, 17 and 16. She remembered exactly where she had been the morning they went missing. July, it had been, the high summer of 1880. The kind of morning that makes a person glad to be alive in the mountains. All birdsong and clean light and the smell of pine warming in the sun. She had been at Halloran's Mercantile, buying flour and lamp oil, when Amos Doyle came through the door with his hat in his hand and a look on his face that stopped her cold. Amos was the sheriff. He had been for 20 years. He was not a man who scared easy, and he was scared. The Barrow and the Hartwell girl, he had said, didn't come home last night. The words had landed in the store like a stone in a still pond. Old Halloran stopped his weighing with the scoop still in his hand. Cora felt the floor of the drop out from under her. They told their folks they were going up to the falls, Amos said, for the afternoon. Never came back for supper. The town had turned out inside of an hour, because that is what a mountain town does. You may not know a man's Christian name. You may look through the poor folks like they were fence posts. But when a child goes missing on the mountain, every soul in the valley puts down what it's holding and takes up a lantern. Cora had seen it before. She would see it again. It was the best thing about a place like Elkridge, and it near about broke your heart to watch, because it so rarely worked. Cora had gone, of course. She knew the country better than any man in that search party, and she said so to no one, and everyone knew it anyway. They combed the trails. They dragged the pool below the falls with grappling hooks, and every man there held his breath each time the hooks came up, and let it out again when they came up empty, and did not know whether to be glad or afraid. They called the girls' names until their voices gave out, and the echoes came back empty off the rock. She had known both girls, not well. But enough. Effie Barrow had been in a wilderness class Cora had taught, years back, for the school children. A bright thing, quick, The kind of girl who asked a question and then asked a better one before you'd finished answering the first. Cora had liked her more than she liked most children, and Cora did not, as a rule, care overmuch for children. But Effie had a mind on her. Effie wanted to know how things worked, how the moss grew thick on the north side of a tree and told you your directions, how you could read the age of a burn scar in the bark, how to find water in a dry season by following the green. Effie had drunk it all down like a girl dying of thirst. Delia Hartwell she had known less. A rancher's daughter from a hardscrabble outfit east of town. Quiet, watchful. Where Effie asked, Delia observed. The Hartwells had never had 2 coins to rub together, and the town had a way of looking through folks like that. The way you look through a fence post. But the 2 girls had been thick as thieves since they were small. The bright one and the quiet one, and where you found the one, you found the other. And Delia had gone up to the falls with Effie that day, the way she had 100 times before, and neither of them came down. They searched 3 weeks. 3 weeks of dust and heat, then, the first full nights of August coming on. Men from 2 counties. Dogs from the mining camps, good dogs, tracking dogs, that ran the trails and found nothing worth the finding. They searched every cave on the maps, and every claim shack, and every cut bank along the creek. They rode the high passes and beat the brush in the low draws. They found nothing, not a footprint that held, not a torn hem, not a hair ribbon, not a single thing to say the girls had ever walked the earth at all. It was as if the mountain had opened its mouth and closed it again. The barrows fell apart quiet. That was how the Barrows did everything. Josiah Barrow was a carpenter, a big, slow, gentle, with hands like hams and a soft voice, and after his daughter vanished, you'd see him standing in the middle of a job with a plank in his hands, and no memory of what he had meant to do with it. He would stand like that for whole minutes, just holding the plank, looking at nothing. His wife stopped coming to town at all. Their boy, Toby, who had been 10 that summer, grew up in the shadow of a sister who was neither dead nor alive, in a house where grief had eaten all the air, and where his father sometimes forgot he was there. The Hartwells fell apart louder, and then not at all, because there was less of them to begin with. Delia's mother had gone frail with the not knowing. She was a small woman to start with, and the grief hollowed her out like a gourd. 2 winters after the girl's mistake, she took a chill that a strong woman would have thrown off in a week, and she did not throw it off, and she died in the spring. The doctor called it lung fever. Everyone else called it a broken heart, and they were closer to right. That left just Delia's father, Amon Hartwell, alone on his failing ranch with his cattle dying in the hard years, and his wife in the ground and his daughter gone to God knew where. A man can carry a great deal, but there is a weight that will break any back, and Amon Hartwell walked bent under it. By 6 months, the official search was over. By a year, folks had mostly stopped saying the names out loud. The grief did not go away, though. It just went underground. It became something the whole town carried and no one spoke of. The way you carry a bad knee. You learn to walk on it. You stop mentioning it. You favor it without thinking. But it never once stops hurting. On the anniversary each July, the church would ring its bell, and folks would go still in the streets for a moment, and then go on about their business, because what else was there to do? You cannot hold a funeral for the Midwest. There is no box to bury. There is only the wondering, going on, year after year, like a splinter too deep to dig out. Cora never stopped, though. That was the thing. That was the thing she had never told a soul. On the trail, out in the deep country with only Boone for company, she would catch herself looking, scanning the tree line, studying an odd fold of rock, listening for a sound that did not belong among the ordinary sounds of the mountain. It had become a habit down in the meat of her, a low hum that never quite went quiet. Some mornings she would set out to check on a spring or count elk sign, and come home 3 hours later, having walked a mile out of her way to peer into a rock cleft she'd peered into 100 times before. As if the answer might have moved in overnight. As if the mountain might have changed its mind about keeping the secret. She had failed those girls. She was sure of it, not in any way a court could name. Nobody blamed her. If you had asked a single soul in Elkridge, they would have said Cora Alden did more than any man in that search and worked longer and cared harder. She'd been mountain seasons for 38 years, and she had not found them. And somewhere in her, in the place where a person keeps the truths too heavy to say, She believed she had missed something, that the answer had been out there the whole time. Close, reachable. And that her failure to reach it had cost 2 girls their childhoods, and one mother her lives. She was about to learn how right she was. She was about to learn it on a foggy October morning, 4 years, and the girls went up to the falls and did not come down. And nothing in her long life had prepared her for what the mountain was. Finally, at last, ready to show. The morning it happened came in late October. Wrapped in fog, Cora had not meant to take the ridge trail that day. It was a hard climb, and her knees had opinions about hard climbs now that they never used to have. 63 years will do that to a body. The knees go first, then the hips, then the will, or so the old-timers said. Cora's will was nowhere near gone. But her knees were a daily argument, and that morning they had voted against the ridge. She had meant to walk the low loop by the creek, easy ground. An hour, maybe, and home for a second cup of coffee. But Boone wanted to go up, and Boone did not usually want much. He was an easy dog, a companionable dog, content to go wherever she went and lie wherever she stopped. But that morning he stood at the fork in the trail, where the low loop split from the ridge climb, and he would not take the low fork. He stood there with his ears up and his gaze fixed on the high ground, and when Cora started down the easy way he did not follow. He looked back at her, and he whined. Just once. All right, Cora said. Her breath came out white in the cold. All right, you contrary old fool. Up we go. She would think about that later, that she had almost gone the other way, that 100 small things had lined up just so to put her on that trail, in that fog on that morning. The dog's whim, her own grudging surrender to it, the lateness of the season, the thickness of the air. Change any one of them and 2 girls stay lost. She would lie awake turning it over, the sheer thin thread of it, and she would not know whether to call it luck, or providence, or the plain dumb mercy of a dog's nose. She never did settle it. Some questions a body carries to the grave unanswered, and is the better for the carrying. The fog was the thickest she had seen in a year. It came rolling down through the pines like something alive, like the breath of the mountain itself, and it swallowed the world down to 30 feet in every direction. The trees loomed up out of it and vanished back into it, black and dripping. Sound when string was closest. Cora's own bootfalls came back to her muffled, as if the country had wrapped itself in wool. A jay called somewhere off to the left, and the call had no direction to it, seemed to come from everywhere, and nowhere at once. She near about turned back. A woman with sense turns back in fog like that. Even a woman who knows the country. Especially a woman who knows the country. Because knowing the country is knowing all the ways it can kill you. A cliff you'd step around in clear weather becomes a grave in fog. A trail you could walk blind becomes a trap when you can't see your own feet. Cora had pulled 2 men off this mountain in her time who'd gone up in weather like this and lost the trail. And one of them had not come off alive. But Boone would not turn back. He pulled ahead of her, nose down, tail stiff, with a kind of purpose she had not seen in him before. Not the loose, easy ranging of a dog on a walk. Not the happy zigzag of a dog following his nose from smell to smell. Something else. Something that had its teeth in the scent and would not let go. He moved like a dog on a trail. A dog with a job. She noticed it. Of course she noticed it. Cora Alden noticed everything. But she read it wrong. She read it as a deer or an elk or maybe a bear come down to fatten before the snow. She had no reason to read it as anything else. There was no reason on God's earth to think the fog-wrapped mountain was about to give up the answer to a 4-year sorrow. Lead. On then, she said. They left the main trail maybe 20 minutes up. Boone veered off to the left, down a slope Cora had always taken for nothing. Just deadfall and loose scree and broad brush not worth the tearing of your sleeves to get through. She had passed that slope 100 times in 30 years, and never once thought to go down it. There was nothing down there. Everyone knew there was nothing down there. The country folded in on itself in a way that promised only brush and broken rock. Except the dog said otherwise. He looked back at her from the top of the slope. Those whiskey eyes, whining low in his chest. Trust me, so the look said, plain as any words a man ever spoke. And she did. Because in 3 years the dog had never led her wrong. Because something about that slope, now that she stood at the head of it, with the fog pooling thick in the hollow below, felt off to her in a way she could not name. A wrongness, a held-breath quality. She had felt it before, maybe, passing this way and never let herself notice. After 30 years in a place you stop seeing with just your eyes, you start feeling the country. And this country this morning felt wrong all the way down. She followed him down, picking her way with her hiking staff, her old knees complaining with every step, the streeshing under her boots. The slope bottomed out into a little ravine she had never known was there, hidden by the way, two shoulders of rock, overlapped and folded into one another. You could stand 10 feet away and never see it. You could hunt the mountain your whole life and walk past the mouth of that ravine and never suspect there was a world tucked in behind it. The mountain had a genius for keeping its own secrets. Cora had always known that. She was about to learn just how deep the genius ran. The fog lay thick in the ravine, close, muffled, like the mountain was holding its breath and waiting to see what she would do. And then Boone stopped, stiff-legged, every hair up along his spine in a ridge from his shoulders to his tail, staring at what looked to be a solid wall of rock, gone green and shaggy with moss and hanging ferns. Cora came up slow behind him, put her hand on his shoulders and felt the tremor in him, the strung-tight quiver of a dog holding still against every instinct that told him to move. She looked where the dog looked, and at first she saw only rock and moss, and then she saw it. Behind the moss, behind the curtain of ferns, an opening in the rock, not large, maybe 4 feet, 3 feet across, but an opening, a mouth, away in a cave. Her heart began to knock against her ribs. 30 years. 30 years she had hiked this country, knew it better than she knew the lines of her own hand, and she had never once seen this cave, never known it was here. It was hidden so perfect that a man could walk past it every day of his life and go to his grave not knowing. You would have to be led to it. You would have to have a nose that saw what eyes could not. She marked the spot in her mind, fixed by 3 landmarks the way she had taught 100 schoolchildren to do. A leaning snag above, a pale scar of quartz in the cliff face to the right, the particular fork of the ravine below. She would be able to find this place again in the dark, in a blizzard, blindfold. Then she dug her lantern out of her pack and struck a match with hands that had gone strangely steady, the way they always did when the thing was serious. Panic came later, for Cora. In the moment she went cold and clear and sure. Stay, she told Boone. He sat, trembling, but he did not look away from that black mouth in the rock, not for 1 second, as if he feared it might close up again if he took his eyes off it, as if he had been waiting his whole dog's life to lead her here, and would not lose it now. Cora ducked through the opening. She had to fold herself near double to get through, and her knees shrieked, and her staff caught on the rock, and for one bad moment she was wedged half in and half out of the earth, with the cold stone pressing her ribs. Then she was through, and she straight to, and the lantern light pushed the dark back a few feet and then gave up. The cave opened out into a room, bigger than she had reckoned from the size of the mouth, big enough to stand up in, even for a tall man, big enough to live in, and the smell she caught it before she saw anything. And it stopped her where she stood, earth, damp stone, the mineral cold of a place the sun had never touched, and under that, faint, old but not old enough, the smell of people, of bodies and smoke and grease and long habitation, the smell of a place where somebody had lived. Cora had been in 100 caves in her life, and none of them had ever smelled like this. Caves smell of nothing, or of bat, or of the animal that dens in them. They do not smell of people, not unless people have been in them a long, long time. Her skin went to gooseflesh, and it was the cold the lantern swung, and the light fell on things that did not belong in any wild cave in the Rocky Mountains. Blankets, a heap of them in the far corner, ratty, stained, gone the gray-brown color of the dirt itself, but woven goods, made by hands in some mill 1,000 miles east and carried up here into the dark. Cora stared at them, and her mind turned slow, refusing at first to make the leap her gut had already made. Tin cans, a little midden of them off to one side. Peaches, maybe, or beans. The paper labels long rotted off. Somebody had eaten out of those cans. Somebody had been fed the black ring of an old fire, stones set in a careful circle, ash gone cold and gray inside it. And around the fire, the floor packed hard and smooth, the way a floor gets packed only by feet, by many feet over much time, and the wall. Cora lifted the lantern, and the light climbed the wall, and her breath went out of her all at once, as if a hand had reached into her chest and squeezed marks, scratched into the stone. made with charcoal, with a burned stick, with the sharp edge of a can lid, with some tally marks, grouped in fives, 4 uprights and a slash across. The way a prisoner counts. The way a body counts when it has nothing left in all the world to count but days. There were hundreds of them. There were more than hundreds. They covered a whole span of the wall, rank on rank, line on line, marching across the rock like an army of the dead. Cora's eye ran along them and could not find the end, and words between the marks. Scratched shaky and desperate into the stone. Written by a hand that shook. Written in the dark, maybe, by feel. Cold. Help us, please. Cora Alden stood in the dark with her lantern shaking in her fist, and she felt the floor of the world tilt under her, and she put her free hand flat against the cold rock to keep from going down. She made herself breathe. She made herself do what 30 years in hard country had trained her to do. Because panic kills. On the mountain, panic is the thing that gets you dead. When a thing goes wrong, you do not scream. You do not run. You do not let the horror of it flood in and drown your thinking. You look. You see. You put the panic in a box, and you close the lid, and you deal with it later. When the seeing is done, so she looked. She saw a corner that had been used for a privy, off away from the sleeping place. Even in captivity, even in the pit, some rag of dignity had made them keep the one corner separate from the other. That small thing near about undid her. That they had tried, in the dark, to live like people. She saw crude shelving made of branches lashed to knobs of rock with strips of cloth. She saw a little pile of stone set out in a pattern on a flat ledge. Some game, maybe. Some way of passing the endless hours. Some way of holding on to sense with both hands in the dark. Cora looked at the stones and thought of 2 girls arranging them, moving them, day after day, and she had to look away. And then the lantern light caught on something small, half buried in the packed dirt of the floor, near the blankets. A glint of metal, dull with tarnish. Cora went down onto her knees. They screamed at her, both of them, and she did not hear them. She took the pencil from her pocket. She would not touch the thing with her fingers. Something in her, some old instinct born of 30 years of reading sign, said do not touch it, do not spoil it, and she obeyed. She used the pencil to work the dirt away from around it. Careful. Careful. The way you uncover a thing that is going to matter. The way you handle a thing that other men will need to see exactly as it lay. It was a locket still, tarnished black in the seams, on a fine broken chain, and when she turned it with the pencil so the lantern caught the face of it, she saw the engraving, a little bird, wings spread, in flight. Cora knew that locket. She had seen it 4 years ago. On the flyers they had printed up and nailed to every post and fence rail in 3 counties. Effie Barrow had been wearing it in the likeness they used. The one taken by the traveling photographer the summer before she vanished. The girl standing stiff and solemn, the way folks stood for photographs then, with the locket bright at her throat. A silver locket with a bird on the face. A gift from her grandmother, the flyer had said. Never took it off. The girls had been here. Right here, in this cave, in this black hole under the mountain. Cold and hungry and counting the days on the wall with a burned stick. The world tilted again, and this time Cora went down with it. Sat right down hard on the cave floor with the lantern beside her, and the little silver bird glinting in the dirt an arm's length away. And for a long moment, she could not move at all. She could not think. She could only feel 4 years of not knowing break open in her chest all at once, like ice going out of a river in the spring, cracking and heaving and roaring, all that frozen grief coming loose at once. The girls had been here. Maybe for a long time. The tally mark said a long time, rank on rank on rank of days, and Cora made her mind work again, made it climb up out of the flood and do its job. Because feeling would not help those girls, only seeing would, because some of those tin cans were not that old. She had noticed it and not let herself understand it. Now she let herself. Some of the cans in that midden had barely begun to rust. The cut edges still bright. A can does not stay bright in a wet cave for 4 years. Can stays bright for a season. 2 at the most, because the ash in the fire ring, when she leaned close and stirred it with her pencil, had not the pure mineral gray of an ancient dead fire. It was something darker underneath, something that had burned not so very long ago, because if the girls had been here, then maybe, just maybe, they were not dead. Cora Alden knelt in a hidden cave in the mountains she had walked for 30 years. And for the first time since a July morning 4 years and better gone, she felt something she had long since given up for lost. Something she had told herself she would never feel again about those two girls. Something with claws. Hope. It near about killed her, that hope. It hurt worse than the grief had. 10 times worse. Because grief you can lie down in. Grief, in time, you can pick a home of. Grief settles and cools and becomes a thing you live beside. But hope makes you get up. Hope makes you fight. Hope reaches into a heart that has finally, painfully learned to be still, and it sets that heart to hammering all over again. And she was 63 years old with bad knees and a dead husband and a daughter 1,000 miles gone. And she had thought, God help her, she had thought she was done with fighting. She was wrong. She backed out of the cave the way she had come in. Slow. Disturbing nothing. She left the locket where it lay, though it cost her something to do it, and she memorized the place of it, and she memorized the whole of that terrible room, because she knew that in an hour or a day men would come, and she would need to tell them how it had been before anyone touched it. And she stood up in the fog with Boone pressing hard against her leg, leaning his whole weight into her, and she put her hand down on his broad, warm skull and held it there a moment, steadying herself on the dog, just breathing, and then she pulled her mind together into something that could act. Get help. That was the thing. Get Amos. Get men and lanterns and the law. She half ran the trail back up out of the ravine, and her legs worked without her, the way legs will in an emergency, while her mind spun and would not stop. She kept seeing those tally marks. She kept doing the arithmetic she did not want to do, could not help but do. If every mark was a day, if there were more than 1,000 of them. And she thought there were more than 1,000, which was more than 3 years of days. 3 years of somebody scratching another mark into the rock. Another dawn survived, another night gotten through. 3 years of that in the dark under the mountain, not 15 miles from her own front porch, not 15 miles from where she slept warm every night, under a good roof. She had lived her small, safe life all that while, walked her trails, written in her book, mourned her husband, quarreled with her daughter by mail, and the whole time, 2 children had been marking days on a wall in the dark, a morning's ride from her door. She reached the cabin with her lungs burning and a stitch in her side like a knife. She did not go in. She scrawled a note in case she was wrong, in case she died on the road down, so someone would know where to look. She saddled the mule, because the mule was surer than the horse in fog and on the loose scree of the lower trail, and she rode down to town faster than a woman her age had any business riding, with Boone loping alongside and the fog just starting to thin and lift as the day warmed toward noon. Amos Doyle was at his office, boots up on the desk, a cup of coffee steaming. He took one look at her face through the window and had the door open before she'd got down off the mule, and his boots came off that desk fast enough to knock his chair over backward. Cora. What? I found something, she said, and her voice was steadier than her hands, which was not saying a great deal because her hands were shaking so she could hardly loop the mule's reins. Amos. I found something about the Barrow girl and the Hartwell girl. The blood went out of his face. All of it. He went the gray of old ash. You'd best sit down, he said, and she did not know if he was talking to her or to himself. No, she said. You'd best get your hat. He got his hat. They rode up together in the afternoon light. Apews and his young deputy, a raw-boned boy named Charlie Pike, who could not have been much past 20, and Cora out ahead of them both because none of them knew the way and she did. The fog had burned off entire by then. The sun came down slantwise through the pines, gold and clean, and the aspens along the creek were turning, and it should have been about the most beautiful evening the good Lord ever made. Under any other circumstance, a man would have stopped his horse just to sit and look at it. None of them looked at anything but the trail. Cora took them down the slope, through the brush, into the ravine that no map had ever known, and she stopped at the wall of moss and ferns and pointed with her staff. There, she said. Amos Doyle stared at that hidden mouth in the rock for a long moment. His jaw worked. I'll be damned, he said, quiet. I have ridden this country 30 years, same as you. I never knew this was here. I have hunted not 200 yards from this spot. Neither did I, Cora said. Boone found it. Amos lit his own lantern with a hand that was none too steady itself, and he looked at her. You went in, I did. I tried not to touch anything I didn't have to, but I had to see, and Amos I saw. He ducked through the opening. She heard him go still inside. She heard the scrape of his boots stop dead on the stone, and then she heard the long, slow breath he let out when the lantern light found the wall. It was a sound I would not forget. A grown man, a hard man, a lawman of 30 years, making a sound like something breaking. Charlie, he called out, and his voice had gone flat and hard and careful. Get down here and touch nothing. You hear me, boy? Nothing. They had the last of the light in that cave. Amos was a careful man. He had worked hard cases, and he knew that a thing once disturbed cannot be put back, and that the truth of a place lives in how it lay before hands were laid on it. He did not let Charlie touch a thing. When Cora showed him the little silver locket, half turned in the dirt where she'd uncovered it, he crouched over it a long while without a word, and then he took off his hat. Just took it right off his head and held it against his chest, there in the dark, the way a man does at a graveside. That's the Barrow locket, he said at last. His voice was rough. Isn't it? It's hers, said Cora. I'd swear to it on the book. On any book you like. Amos stood up. His knees cracked in the silence. He was 58, and he felt every year of it in that moment, and more, and she could see it on him, the weight coming down. Somebody kept them here, he said. Half to her, half to himself, half maybe to God. If God was listening in a place like that. Somebody kept those two girls in a hole in the ground. Close enough to town to fetch supplies whenever they ran low. Far enough out that no soul would ever find it. His jaw worked. 4 years, Cora. 4 years we grieved them for dead, and they were right here under the mountain the whole time. Some of it's fresh, Cora said. Made herself say it. The cans, the ash. Amos, look close at that ash. That's not 4 years old. That's this season. That's months. Maybe less. He turned and looked at her in the lantern light, and she watched the same terrible arithmetic go through his eyes that had gone through hers up on the trail. She watched him do the sum and arrive at these and go pale all over again. You're thinking they might still be alive, he said, barely above a whisper. I'm thinking whoever had them might have moved them, she said. And I'm thinking, Amos, if there's a chance, any chance at all, then you and me, we do not get to be tired. We do not get to be old. We do not get to grieve, not yet, not one more minute of it, because grief is for the dead, and we do not yet know that they are dead. Amos Doyle looked at her a long moment in the dark of that terrible room. No, he said, we surely do not. They rode down off the mountain in full dark, and Amos sent Charlie on ahead to wire the marshal's office in Denver, first thing in the morning, because a thing this size, a thing with the captive living victims, and God knew what all else, was bigger than one county sheriff, and he knew it, and was man enough to say so. And Cora rode home alone with Boone traveling beside the mule, and the stars coming out hard and cold, and countless above the black shoulders of the peaks. She did not sleep that night. She sat at her table with the lamp burning, and her journal open in front of her, and she wrote down every last thing while it was fresh, because memory lies and softens and rearranges, and ink does not. The fog, the dog's whim at the fork, the slope, the ravine, the moss on the rock, the mouth of the cave, the smell, the blankets, the cans, the fire ring. The stones set out in their pattern, the wall of tally marks, and her best count of them, the words scratched between, the locket with its little silver bird. She got it all down, and then she did a thing she did not want to do. She turned back through the journal, back through 4 years of pages, back through hikes and weather and elk sign and the slow turning of the seasons. She was looking for something, and she was afraid to find it, and her hands went cold as she turned the pages, colder with each one, and somewhere down near the middle of the book she found it, an entry from 3 years back. The autumn of 1881. A few lines in her own hand, the ink faded a little now, smoke. Northwest slope above Willow Creek, up toward the old benchland. Odd. No claim up there that I know of, no reason for a fire. Too far for hunters this late in the season. Mentioned it to Amos in town. He allowed it was likely a lightning smolder come up slow after the rains. Let it go. Cora stared at those words a long time, until the lamp guttered, and she had to trim it. Smoke. In a country where nobody should have been. 3 years ago. When those girls, if they were still alive, would already have been in that cave the better part of a year. A year in the dark and the cold, needing wind, warmth, seeing fire. She had seen it. She had stood on the western ridge with the whole valley laid out below her, and she had seen a thread of smoke climbing where no smoke had any business climbing. And she had thought, in her own words, in her own hand, how odd. And she had mentioned it to Amos, and Amos had shrugged, and she had let it go. Let it go. She had written those 3 words herself. Let it go. And gone home to her supper, and her warm bed, and her quiet grief, while 2 girls counted another day on a wall in the dark, not 2 miles from where she'd stood. The guilt that had lived quiet in her chest for 4 years reared up now with weight and teeth. It was not the vague, formless guilt of before, the sense that she had somehow missed something. It was specific now. It had a date on it. It had her own handwriting on it. She had seen the sign. She, who prided herself on seeing everything, on missing nothing, on reading the country like scripture. He had seen the one true scene in 4 years of searching, and she had let it go. She put her face in her old brown hands, and she stayed like that a long while in the guttering lamplight. And Boone came and put his big head on her knee and looked up at her with those whiskey eyes, and she let him. But there was something else in her, alongside the guilt, because guilt is a coward's country. And Cora Alden had never been a coward in her life. Guilt looks backward. Guilt sits down in the ash of what's already burned and weeps over it. And there was no time for that now. There was a locket in Amos Doyle's evidence, and a wire about to hum down the mountain to Denver, and a chance, a real and living chance, that those girls were still drawing breath somewhere in this same cold country under these same cold stars. And if there was a chance, she would spend the last strength in her body to chase it down. She would climb every ridge and crawl into every hole and walk until her old legs gave out under her. She would earn back, or die trying to earn back, the thing she had let go 3 years ago on the western ridge. "Good boy," she whispered to the dog. Her voice cracked clean in 2 on it. "We're not done. Do you hear me? We are not near done." Boone's tail thumped once against the floorboards, and that same night, past midnight, the first snow of the winter came down, soft and silent past her window. Come early, come hard. Cora Alden on the porch in the cold and watched it fall through the lamplight, silent, patient, endless, whitening the yard and the pines and the long grave mound behind the cabin where Elias slept. And she knew, watching it, what it was telling her. It was telling her the clock had started, because when the deep snow comes to the high country, it shuts the mountain like our door. It buries the trails. It fills the passes. It turns 15 miles of hard, walking into 30 miles of impossible, and it does not care one whit for the lives of 2 girls or the hope of 1 old woman. In a few weeks' time, maybe less, that white door would swing shut, and whatever was up there, alive or dead, would stay up there until the spring thaw came, 5 long months off, to open the mountain again. Whatever was going to be done had to be done before the snow shut the door. "Not this winter," she said, low to the falling snow, to the dark, to the mountain that had kept it secret 4 long years. "You are not keeping them 1 more winter. Do you hear me? Not 1 more." The mountain said nothing. Mountains never do. The messages came back up the mountain the next day, and the day after, the Denver marshal was sending someone, and not just any man, a special investigator, come out originally from back east, who had worked the girl's disappearance 4 years ago, in the first weeks before the trail went cold and the case went in a drawer. Someone who knew the file. Someone who had walked the falls and interviewed the families and read the whole sad, useless record of the first search. A woman which set the whole town to talking, up and down the one street of it, because nobody in Elkridge had ever heard of a woman doing such work, carrying a badge and a gun and the authority of the federal government. But the marshal's office set store by her. Set great store, the wire said, and that was enough for Amos, and Amos was enough for Cora. Her name was Margaret Vane. She came up on the noon stage 3 days after the finding, and Cora met her at the sheriff's office at Amos's asking. Vane was somewhere in her 40s, trim still. She had a way of moving that wasted nothing, no gesture spent that did not need spending, and of looking at a thing or a person that took the whole of it in at one long pass and gave nothing back. Cora had known a few men like that in her long life. Scouts, mostly. Army men. Men the army used up in hard country and then pretended it had never used at all. Vane had that same quality all through her. Watchful, careful, still all the way down to the bottom. "You're the one who knows the country," Vane said. It was not a question. I know it well enough. Your dog found the cave. He did, Cora said. I just had the sense to follow him. Vane studied her a moment, and something moved behind the still gray of her eyes. Not warmth. Cora did not think Margaret Vane trafficked much in warmth any more than she did herself, but something. The recognition, maybe, that one competent creature gives to another when it meets one in the wild. A kind of professional respect offered without a word. She had Cora tell it all, from the door of the cabin that morning to the ride down to town. The fog, the dog, the slope, the ravine, the cave, the wall, the locket. Vane listened without once interrupting, and made small quick notes in a book with a pencil she kept needle sharp, and when Cora was done, and closed the book and was quiet a moment. Then she said the thing that changed everything. There's a matter you should know, Vane said. My men were up at the cave at first light. They found more than the locket after you left it, a page. Paper, wedged down behind a stone, where the wet couldn't reach it whole, water-stained, most of it gone, but there was writing on it, a girl's hand, and we matched it, Miss Alden. To schoolwork the Barrow family kept all these years. It's Effie's. Cora's heart went straight to her throat. What does it say? Little enough, Vane said. The water got most of it, like I said, but there are dates in the margin, the way a body keeps a diary marking the days. She paused, and for once the deep stillness in her broke, just a hair's width, just enough for Cora to see the thing underneath. Miss Alden, Vane said. The last date we can read on that page is from 3 months ago. The room went dead silent. 3 months. Not 4 years. Not old dead history to be grieved and buried. 3 months, this past summer, when the Espens were green and grown. Cora was walking her chaff 15 miles distant. Then they could still be alive, Cora said, and her voice was barely a breath, barely a sound at all. We don't know that, Vane said, careful, level. A great deal can happen in 3 months in the country. I won't lie to you and I won't sell you false comfort, but they could be. Margaret Vane held her eyes, and this time she did not look away and she did not soften it and she did not hedge. Yes, she said, they could be, which is why, Miss Alden, as of this hour I am no longer working a grave. I am working a rescue. She stood and gathered her book and looked down at the old woman before her. And I am going to need you, you and that dog of yours. You found, 40 men in 4 years, and every trained tracker the territory could muster could not find. I would be a fool to go up that mountain without you, and whatever else I am not a fool. Cora Alden sat in the sheriff's office in the town of Elkridge, 63 years old, with her dead husband 8 years in the ground, and her daughter 1,000 miles gone, and 4 years of grief cracking in her chest like river ices. And she thought of Effie Barrow with her quick, bright questions, and of quiet, watchful Delia Hartwell, whose mother had died of the not knowing, and of a page of water-ruined paper with a girl's hand on it, dated 3 months back, 3 months, when Cora had thought them long past any saving. You've got me, she said, whatever it takes, however long it takes. You've got me. And outside the window, the snow that had started in the night came down harder, and the clock, unheard but felt by every soul in that room, ticked on. They rode up to the cave site at dawn the next morning, through snow still sifting down out of a sky the color of old pewter, an inch of it on the ground already and more coming. And what had been a lone hole in the rock 2 stacks back was now a hive of men and purpose, because word had gone down the mountain, and word had gone out over the wire. And now there were men everywhere. Sheriff's men, 2 deputy marshals up from Denver, hard, silent men who moved like Vane moved. Riders from 2 counties who had helped search 4 years ago and had never once forgiven themselves for coming home empty, and who had put down whatever they were holding the moment the word reached them and come. They had strung a rope line across the mouth of the ravine to keep the captors back. They had rigged a canvas fly against the falling snow, and they moved, all of them, with the grim quiet of men who understood exactly where they stood, that they stood on the spot where 2 children of their own valley had been kept like animals in the dark, a morning's ride and from all their warm houses. Under the fly they had set up a rough table, a wagon gate laid across 2 crates, and on it, laid out careful under weighted cloth against the wind, was the evidence. The locket in a little labeled sack, the cans bagged separate, charcoal scraped from the wall, and in the center, flat between 2 panes of window glass that Vane had somehow got hold of up here at the end of the earth, the diary page, Cora bent over the glass. The paper was buckled and brown, curled at the edges where it had dried. The ink had run and bled and gone to ghosts in half the places. But there were words, some of them. A girl's hand, shaky, cramped, small. The hand of someone writing in poor light with a stub of pencil, hoarding the paper, making it last. Can't tell how long anymore. Delia's getting weaker. He says we are safe here, but this is not safe. This is a prison. Mama, if you ever read this, I'm so sorry. We tried to get away, but he always. And there it stopped. Dissolved into a brown smear where the water had taken the rest of it. Rest of whatever Effie Barrow had needed to say. Cora straightened up slow. Her throat had closed to a pinhole. She was writing to her mother, she said, when she could get the words out. Yes, said Vane, quiet, standing beside her, and you'll note the words she uses. There and there. He. One man, most like. One man who kept them. She writes Delia was getting weaker, Cora said. So they were together. Both of them, all that while, in that hole, both of them. For a long while by the marks on that wall. My men counted them careful in the daylight, over 1,000. Better than 300 days before this page was even written. Cora let that number sit in her, heavy and cold as a river stone in the belly. She did not repeat it. She did not need to. It had lodged in her the first night, and it would lodge in her till she died. There's more, Vane said, and she moved down the table and lifted a second pane of glass. Under it was a tiff card, a scrap torn from the side of a wooden crate, and on it, drawn careful and small in charcoal, was a map. We found this wedged in a dry crevice, high up where the damp couldn't reach it, Vane said. That's why it kept when so much else rotted. Cora leaned close over it, and her scout's eye, 30 years trained to read the shape of land off a page, went to work without her telling it to. It was a map, and more than that. It was a map of country she knew. This ridge line here, Serter, she said, her finger hovering above the card, not touching. That could be Cathedral Rock, the way it steps down to the north, and this wavy line here. That's water. That's a creek. That's Willow Creek. Creek. Near as I can read the run of it. And this, said Vane. And she pointed to a mark set apart in one corner. An X, done heavy. And beside it, in a shaky child's letters, 2 words. Safe place. What do you make of that? Vane said. Cora studied the X a long moment. Studied its place against the ridge line and the creek and the whole shape of the drawn country. She fetched her own notebook out of her coat and worked the drawn map against her own memory of the land, back and forth, and her mouth went dry as ash. If I'm reading it true, she said, and I think I am, that X sits about 3 miles northeast of this cave, up in the old benchland. Of Lovely Creek. Vane went very still, the stillness of a hunting animal that has heard a twig snap. Is there anything up there, she said. Nothing on any map, said Cora. Timber and rock, old growth. Country nobody has any reason to go into. And then she stopped, because a cold hand had closed around her heart and squeezed. Except what? Except that's where I saw the smoke, Cora said. Her voice had gone strange in her own ears. 3 years ago. That's the exact country, Vane. That's the very benchland. I saw a fire burning up there where no fire ought to have been, and I wrote it in my book, and I let it go. Margaret Vane looked at her a long, level, measuring moment. And there was no accusation in it. That was the mercy of the woman. There was only calculation and a kind of grim gathering. Then that's where we go, she said. Today. Now. Before this snow makes up its mind to stay. They put a party together inside the hour. Vane. The 2 deputy marshals from Denver, Amos Doyle, who would not be left behind, jurisdiction or no jurisdiction, and no man there had the heart or the standing to tell him he must, because those were his town's girls and he had failed them once and would sooner die than fail them twice. Charlie Pike, green but game, keeping close to Amos, and Cora, and Boone. The climb northeast from the cave was every bit as bad as Cora had promised them it would be. The country up there was a wreck of deadfall and loose rock and thick tangled undergrowth. The Natu snow, an inch, 2 inches now, made every step a gamble, hiding the loose stones and slicking the deadfall. They went slow. They went careful. Boone ranged ahead through it all, sure-footed and tireless, checking back over his shoulder now and again to make certain the old woman was still coming on behind. She was always still coming. She was the oldest in that party by 20 years and more, old enough to be mother to any man there and grandmother to Charlie Pike, and she never once fell behind, never once asked for a halt on her own account. The marshals from Denver looked at her sidesway when they thought she couldn't see them doing it. The way men look at a thing they did not expect to be true and cannot quite make themselves believe. They had been at it 90 minutes when Cora called the halt herself. "Hold," she said. She had stopped in a stand of old fir, and she was turning slow on her heel, studying the ground, the trees, the fall of the land, the whole feel of the place. Some old wire down in the meat of her had begun to hum. That wrongness again. That held breath quality. "This is the place," she said, and she pulled out her journal and flipped with cold fingers to the entry from 3 years gone. "Right about here is where I stood." No, she looked around, sighting. There, on that little rise. "I was up there on the western ridge, looking east across the draw, and the smoke came up." She lifted her arm and sighted along it, the way you'd sight a rifle, from right about there, which is right about where we're headed now. 3 years ago, Vane said, low, coming to stand at her shoulder and follow the line of her arm, which would put it a year, near enough, after the girls were taken. "A year in that cave," said Cora, "and somebody up here in this benchland keeping a fire going, cooking, warming, living." The knowledge came down on her again, heavy as the first time, heavier, that she had seen it, that she had stood right about here, or just up there, and seen the very smoke of the very fire, and turned for home. It near about buckled her knees under her, but Margaret Vane put a hand on her arm, firm, steadying, not gentle, exactly. Vane did not do gentle, but solid grief later, Vane said. It was the same thing Cora had said to Amos in the cave, and Cora knew it, and knew Vane was giving her own medicine back to her, and knew it was right. "Work now," Vane said. "Work now," said Cora, and she straightened her old back and set her jaw and went on. And a quarter mile up, the dog told them something new. It came through his whole body first, the way it always did with Boone, before ever it reached his voice. Cora, who had watched that dog range these mountains for 3 years, saw it start. She saw his easy trotting gait break stride. She saw his head come up off the ground scent he'd been running and swing hard to the left, into the little breeze that stirred down the draw. She saw the hackles lift and stand in a stiff dark ridge shoulders clean down his spine, and she saw the tail sink and go rigid. "Somebody's been through here," Cora said. Before a single man in that party had seen a single track in the snow. Before there was anything to see at all but a dog gone strange. "Stand where you are, all of you." And 6 armed men and 1 Denver investigator stopped stone dead in their tracks in the falling snow because a 63-year-old woman with a hiking staff told them to. One of the marshals eased forward, quiet, to where Boone stood pointing with his whole rigid body. He went down on one knee and brushed at the fresh snow with the flat of his hand. "Footprints," he said. "Low, small, recent. 2 days, maybe 3, under this new snow." Cora's heart slammed hard against her ribs. "Could be one of the girls," said Vane. "Could be whoever took them," said Amos, low and grim. "Only one way to know," said Cora, and she nodded the dog on. They went on with their nerves strung tight as new fence wire, every man's hand near his gun. And the country opened up ahead of them into a little clearing among the big old firs. Snow hushed and still, and then Vane stopped and lifted one hand and said low, they're 30 yards on, half hidden behind a screen of brush and deadfall, a building, not a tent, not a lean-to, not any temporary hunter's thing thrown up for a season, a cabin, small, old, weathered gray as bone, but the roof held. The walls stood square and true, and there was a trail worn to the door of it, worn by feet, going in and out, and fresh footprints in the mud and snow of the threshold, and a stack of firewood under a lean-to at the side, seasoned wood, dry wood, laid up careful by somebody who meant to stay warm through a winter. Somebody lived here. Cora had lived 30 years in these mountains, and hunted every draw and cranny of them, and she had never once known this cabin was here. The marshals went in tactical, the way such men do, pistols out and low. They spread wide and moved up on the cabin from 2 sides, covering one another, using the trees. One reached the door and tried it. It held. A simple padlock, hasped to the frame, the hasp screwed to old wood. Amos brought up a pry bar from his saddle kit and threw his weight on it, and the old wood gave with a shriek of screws. Anyone within, a marshal called, hard and loud. "Federal marshals. Come out. Show your hands. Silence." They went in fast, 2 of them, low. Cora stayed back at the tree line with Boone, her heart in her throat, one hand knotted in the dog's ruff. Half of her praying with everything she had that The girls were inside those walls, and half of her praying just as hard that they were not, because she did not know what 4 years in the dark might have left of them, and she was afraid, bone afraid, of what she might see. The marshals came out inside of 5 minutes. Clear, one called. Nobody home. And then, in a different voice, a lower voice, a voice with something wrong in it, something struck and hollow. But you'll want to see this, all of you. You'll want to come and see. Cora went in. The cabin was one room, maybe 5 feet by 20. A little iron wood stove, cold now, with a stovepipe run up through the roof, a rough plank table, 2 sleeping pallets laid on the floor side by side, close. Shelves along one wall stocked with airtights and dry good, flour and beans and salt, crude, all of it. Rough, but it was a home. Somebody had made a home of this place. There was even a scrap of curtain at the one small window, faded gingham gone the color of dust. And it was full of the girls. That was the thing that hit Cora first, and it hit her like a fist under the heart. Because there were drawings pinned to the log walls with slivers of wood for pins, cheatish sketches done in charcoal on scraps of paper and flattened tin. Mountains, birds, so many birds, birds in flight. A house with smoke curling up out of the chimney and a fence and a tree beside it. The kind of house a girl draws when she is trying with all her might to remember, a house she loved and is starting, after too long, to forget. There were tally marks carved into the log walls in 2 places, small, careful ones and larger, rougher ones. And in the corner, the 2 pallets, made up neat with the blankets folded square. Blankets still cleaner than the rotted rags in the cave. And on the table, Cora saw it, and she stopped breathing to entire a stick. Wood. A peeled branch, maybe 8 inches long, worn smooth with handling, and notched. Notch after notch after notch, cut careful into the wood, all along its length, on every face of it, round and round and round, the way a body will when it runs out of room and cannot bear to stop counting. She went to it. She did not touch it. She had learned that lesson in the cave. But she leaned close over it and she began to count, and she made the marshals count it with her, and the number the 3 of them came to, checking each other, was the same number Vane's men had come to on the wall of the cave 2 days before. Over 1,000. They were moved, Vane said. She had come to stand at Cora's shoulder, and her voice was very quiet. They started their count in the cave on the stone wall. Then somebody brought them here, to this cabin, and they took up the count again, right where they'd left it, on this stick. They carried the number with them. They never once stopped counting the days. Not for the moving, not for anything. Cora's hands trembled over the little notched stick, and she made herself lower them. "Look at the firewood outside," she said. Made her voice work. "Look at the dust on these shelves. Or the lack of it." Run your finger there. "Somebody has been keeping this place. He's sweeping it, laying in wood. This is not a thing abandoned years back. This is lived in. Recent. Weeks, not years." "Agreed," Vane said, and she was already turning for the door, already calling in her men to work the room. "We process every inch of this. Every fiber, every mark, every scrap. I want to know who has been here, and I want to know where in God's name they went." Cora stepped back outside into the falling snow. She needed the air, the clean cold of it after the closed dead air of that room so full of 2 girls' captivity, and stood a moment with her face turned up to the sky and let the snow fall on it. And then she made herself think, the way a captive would think, the way she had learned, over 30 years of pulling lost folk off this mountain, to put herself inside another person's fear. If you had been kept in that cabin, and if you had gotten out, escaped or been moved, which way would you go? She turned slow on her heel, reading the country all around the clearing. The land fell away to the east, downhill toward lower ground, toward the town, toward warm houses and lit windows and the whole living world. That was where you'd run if running was in you. Toward home, toward help. West rose higher and colder and lonelier, up toward the divide. North and south were dense black timber, with no trail through them at all, country that would eat a lost person in a day. She walked the edge of the clearing, slow. Boone padding at her side, subdued now, tail down, feeling the weight of the place the way dogs do. And on the eastern rim of the clearing, at just about the height of a girl's shoulder, she found a branch snapped clean off. The break was fresh. The wood still pale and wet in the wound of it, not yet grayed, and below it, on the ground, half filled now with new snow, was a print, a single print, pressed deep and clear where the mud had been soft. Small. A girl's Vane, she called. Sharp. Here. Vane came fast across the clearing. She looked at the broken branch. She looked at the print in the mud. She looked back at Cora. Could be one of them, Vane said. Careful, not letting herself hope too loud. Maybe. Could be somebody else entire. Look at the break, Cora said, chest high on a small person. A branch does not break itself off chest high and clean like that. That's a hand did that. Somebody came through here going east toward home. Somebody small, and not 3 days ago, by the color of that wood. Vane's gray eyes went narrow. You're thinking they escaped, she said. You're thinking they're out there right now, loose, alive. I'm thinking it's possible, said Cora. Maybe whoever has them got spooked when we started turning over the mountain and moved them again in her hearing. Or maybe she stopped, made herself say it. Maybe they finally got their chance, after 4 long years of watching for it, and they took it, and they ran. Either way, said Vane, and there was heat in her level voice now, real heat, the first Cora had heard from her. Either way, the trail is warm. First warm trail in 4 years. She looked out east, downhill, into the falling snow and the darkening timber. We do not let it go cold again. Not now. Not for anything. They came down off the mountain in the last of the failing light. And at the trailhead where the horses waited, a small silent knot of people stood in the falling snow. Waiting. Word traveled fastest a valley that size. Cora knew Josiah Barrow at once. The big carpenter had aged 20 years in the force since his girl vanished. He stood there bareheaded in the snow, turning his hat around and around in his big scarred hands, turning it, unable to stop. And beside him stood a lean, weathered man with grief carved so deep into the lines of his face that it had become the whole of him, had eaten every other thing a face can hold. Ammon Hartwell, Delia's father. The rancher who had lost his wife and his cattle to the hard years and had nothing left in all the wide world, but a daughter who was neither dead nor alive. Josiah came to Cora the moment he saw her come down out of the trees. Miss Alden. His voice broke clean across the 2 words. Amos said. He said you found the cave, that you found Effie's locket with the little bird on it. He reached out and took her old hands in his big rough ones, and his grip was desperate, crushing. A drowning man's grip. Do you think she's alive? Tell me true. For the love of God, tell me true. Do you think my girl is alive? Cora looked at this great broken man, and she would not lie to him. She had never in all her life lied to a person who needed the truth, and she would not start with this one, in the snow, at the end of everything. I don't know, she said that. God's own honest Josiah, I don't know. But she held his eyes and made herself go on. But I know the evidence says she was alive 3 months ago, so. And writing and thinking and hoping. And I know we found sign this very day that both girls were together and being moved as recent as a few days back. And I know one thing more. She tightened her old hands hard on his big ones. I know that we are not going to stop. Not this time. Not while there is breath in this old body and snow yet off the high passes. Do you hear me, Josiah Barrow? We do not stop. Ammon Hartwell stepped forward then, out of the snow into the lantern light. My wife didn't make it, he said, flat, hollowed clean out. No self-pity in it, which was somehow worse. The not knowing killed her. 2 winters back she took sick, and she just let go. There was nothing left in her to hold on with. His jaw worked, and my Delia doesn't even know. My girl's been up in that mountain 4 years, and she doesn't know her own mother's in the ground. And I need. His voice caught and held. I need to find her. Tell her mother loved her to the very last hour. That's all I got left to do on this earth. Tell my daughter that Cora felt the whole weight of their 2 griefs come down on her like a stone laid across her chest, so heavy she could scarce draw breath. We'll find them, she heard herself say. I promise you both. We will not stop until we do. It was a promise she had no earthly right to make. No lawman would have made it. No sensible soul would have made it. Vane would never have made it. But looking at those 2 ruined faces in the lantern light and the falling snow, she meant every single word of it, down to the ground. And she would have died on the spot before she took one word of it back. That night the wire brought a name up the mountain, and Amos rode out through the snow to Cora's cabin to carry it to her himself, rather than let her hear its second hesitation. That cabin, he said, standing in her doorway with the snow melting on his shoulders and Boone sniffing at his boots. It sits on ground that used to belong to a family, name of Kroll. 40 years back, this was before the mines came in. They ran a few head of cattle up there. Tried to. Hard country for it. The parents are long dead and gone. The land got sold off for the timber. But there was a son. Silas Kroll, said Cora. The name meant nothing to her. And then, faintly, something. Some half-glimpsed face at the edge of memory. A man on the boardwalk. A man loading a wagon. Nobody. Everybody. She could not place him. You'd not know him to name him, Amos said, reading her face. But you might know his face if you saw it. He drifts, has for years, no fixed place, works odd jobs for cash, money mucking stalls, splitting wood, and keeps himself to himself. The kind of man a whole town can lay eyes on 100 times over the years, and never once troubled to learn his name. We talked to him, 4 years back, in the first days of the search. Talked to every drifter and stranger we could lay hands on, said Cora. And he had an alibi, said Amos, his mouth twisted around the word like it tasted bad. A good one. Solid. 2 men swore they were with him the whole of the day those girls went up to the falls. We crossed him off the list the first week and never looked back. But Cora, he grew up on that ground. He grew up hunting that benchland and every draw around it, back when it was his daddy's. He'd know every cave and cut bank and old claim shack from here to the divide better than any living man. Better, maybe, than you. Vane thinks that alibi was set up careful, bought and paid for, or leaned on, set up so we'd cross him off and leave him be. Vane is not often wrong about such things. Cora sat down slow at her table. One man, she said. Effie, wrote he. Kept them. Maybe, said Amos. He came in and pushed the door shut against the cold and the blowing snow, but here's the thing that's got Agent Vane chewing nails clean down to the quick. The handwriting fellow, the expert she wired for, come up from Denver. He's been over every scrap. The tally marks, the diary page. Both maps, Cora said. She looked up sharp. There were two. We found the second one in that cabin today, tucked down behind the stove where the heat kept it dry. More careful than the first. Better drawn. And here's the thing, Cora. Here's the thing that don't sit right. The hands don't match up the way you'd think they ought. He came to the table and leaned his fists on it. The girl's hands are on the tally marks and the diary page. Effie's neat and small. Delia's rougher, bigger. Fine. That's 2 hands, and we know whose. But those maps. He tapped the table with one blunt finger. Those maps are a third hand. A grown hand. A hand that knew what it was about. Cora went cold. All through. A third hand, she said. A third hand, said Amos. Somebody who knew this country deep. Deep the way you know it, Cora. Not the way a body learns it in a season or 2. There's notes wrote on that second map about seasonal washouts. About where Willow Creek jumps its bank in the spring melt. About shortcuts and game trails that aren't on any map ever printed by God or the government. That is not a drifter's knowledge. That is not even Silas Kroll's knowledge, growing up on that benchland or no. That is deep local knowledge, years and years of it. Somebody who has spent a lifetime learning this ground. Cora sat very still at her own table in her own warm cabin, and she felt the floor of her certainty shift under her. So he wasn't alone, she said. He wasn't alone. There was at least one more. A third hand that knew these mountains cold, and that one. Amos spread his big hands wide and empty. That one we don't have any name for at all. That one is still out there in the dark somewhere. And that one, Cora, may be the worst of the lot. Cora did not sleep again that night. She sat at her table long after Amos had ridden back down through the snow, with the lamp burning low and both maps spread before her. In the copies Vane's man had drawn out fresh, and she studied that third hand until her eyes ached and swam in the lamplight. There was something in it. Something naggingly, maddeningly familiar in it. In the very shape of the letters. In the little symbols used to mark water and elevation and danger and safe passage. Something that plucked at a wire buried deep in her memory and would not, no matter how she coaxed it, tell her its name. She fell asleep at last that hard chair near dawn, with her cheek come to rest on the cold maps and the lamp burned near out, and she dreamed. She dreamed of children in a summer meadow, sitting in the grass with slates and bits of charcoal, learning to read the country. She dreamed of her own voice, younger, teaching them. This mark for water, children. This one for a grade too steep to climb, this one for north. And she dreamed of a young woman among them, older than the children, a helper, dark hair coming loose from its pins, bent over a slate with a look of pure joy on her face. And when Cora woke, cold and stiff and aching, with the fire dead gray in the hearth and the maps stuck to her cheek, and the gray dawn just breaking at the window, the wire in her memory had finally, at long last, rung its bell, and she went cold all the way down to the soles of her feet. Because she knew that hand, she had seen those symbols before. Every one of them. The little forked mark for water. The way of showing a killing grade with close-set hatching. The lines drawn near enough to touch. She had not just seen those marks somewhere sometime. She had made them. She had invented them. Over 30 years alone. On this mountain, her own private shorthand for a country she loved. And she had taught them. To a bare handful of souls in all her life. And to one soul above all the others 7 years back. Well before the girls ever vanished. The Elkridge School had run a wilderness class, one glad summer for the older children, orienteering, map reading, how to find north off the moss on a tree, and the moving sun, and the wheeling stars, how to keep from dying if the country turned on you sudden, the way this country could. Cora had volunteered to teach it, given her whole heart to it, because she had loved those bright, hungry children more than she'd let herself love anything since Rachel was small. Because teaching them was the closest thing she had come to being a mother again in all the empty years after Rachel grew up and grew away. And she had not taught it alone. There had been a young woman, new to Elkridge that very year, come down from somewhere north Wyoming way, quiet as a held breath, dark-haired, and on fire, purely on fire for the wild country, in a way that had gladdened Cora's lonely old heart the moment she saw it, because you did not often, in a lifetime, meet a young person who cared for the mountains the way Cora cared for them. They had hiked together, the two of them, that summer and the next, shared roots dug from the ground, shared a canteen and a view, and a long companionable silence on a high ridge. Cora had taught her the country, had opened her book of 30 years and poured it out into a pair of eager young hands, had taught her the symbols, her own private system, the forked line for water, the close hatching for a killing grade. She had taught her everything she knew. Winifred Voss. They had all called her Freda. Cora sat in the cold, dead gray light of that dawn with the maps stuck to her cheek, and she peeled them slow away from her skin. And she said the name out loud into the empty cabin. And it fell out of her mouth and dropped into the silence like a stone dropped down a deep, deep well, and she waited sick for the far-off sound of it hitting bottom. Freda Voss. Boone lifted his head from the hearthrug and looked at her across the cold room. She rode down to town before she had even eaten, before the coffee was made, and found Vane at the sheriff's office going over the maps by lamplight, looking like she had not closed her eyes in 3 days, which likely she had not. "I know the hand," Cora said, before she was even through the door, before her hat was off her head. "The third hand, those symbols on the maps, they're mine, my own private system. I made them up myself over 30 years, and I never taught them to but a handful of souls in all that time. And one of the souls I taught was a young woman, 7 years back, in that summer wilderness class the school ran. Her name was Freda Voss. Vane was already up out of her chair and reaching for a book. Describe her. Late 20s then, so past 30 now. Dark hair. Slight. Quiet as a held breath. New to the town that year. Come down from up north. Wyoming, I always took it, though she never set it plain. She loved this country. She knew it well when she came, and she'd come to know it far better. We hiked it together, the two of us, more times than I can count. And I taught her." Cora's own throat closed on the words, "God help me." "I taught her the marks." Vane crossed the small room and pulled a paper from a folder. "A likeness, an old one done by the school photographer for the town, records the same summer, the whole class lined up stiff and squinting in the sun. Is this her?" Cora looked, and a young woman looked back out at her from the flat gray paper. Dark hair pulled up nut-knit under a hat, serious still face, and the eyes, those warm eyes, those kind eyes. The eyes of a person who had seemed 7 years gone, to want nothing in all the wide world but to help a pack of children learn to love the wild high places the way she loved them. "That's her," Cora said, and her own voice had gone to ash in her mouth. "That's Freda Voss." Vane was already moving, already calling for the records, and within the hour they had it, wired up from the TZ. Freda Voss had left the Elkridge School 5 years back, given her notice one spring and packed and gone. Family matters, she had told the schoolmaster. No forwarding left, no words since. Vanished as clean as the girls themselves. 5 years back, Amos said, reading over the record where it lay on the desk. His voice was slow and heavy. That's the spring. The spring before those girls were taken. She left the school in the spring, and they were taken that summer. She taught them, Cora said. The words came out of her before she had even finished thinking the thought all the way through. What? Said Vane, turning sharp. Freda Voss. The year before she gave her notice and left. She taught the older children at the school, the sixth form. Effie Barrow would have been in that class, and Delia Hartwell right alongside her. Cora put her hand flat on the desk to steady herself, because the room had gone unsteady. She was their teacher, Vane, their own teacher. She knew their faces. She knew their names and their homes and their habits. She knew, because every soul in this valley knew, that those two girls loved above all things to hike up to the falls of a Saturday afternoon. The room went very, very quiet, because they were all of them seeing it now, all at once, the same terrible picture, assembling itself piece by piece in the lamplight. A trusted teacher, a kind, quiet, beloved young woman that any girl in that valley would have followed up a dreamy trail without end thought in all the world. A friendly, familiar face met on the path to the falls, and behind the kind, familiar face, behind those warm and gentle eyes. She's still here, Cora said. Lo? What makes you say that, said Vane. Because the maps are recent, Cora said. She jabbed her old finger down hard on the careful one, the second one, the one from the cabin. This note, right here, about the Western Trail washing out. That washout, Vane, that happened this past spring. Not 3 years back. This spring just gone. Which means whoever drew this map was up in this hot country within the last 6 months. She raised her head, and her pale gray eyes were hard and bright. She never left, Vane. 5 years, everybody thought her gone, and she never left at all. She's been up in these mountains the whole time. The whole 4 years. Vane's face went hard and flat as the mountain granite. Then she knows we found the cave, Vane said. Slow, working it through. She knows we found the cabin. She knows by now that we found the girl's trail and that we are coming. And she knows how to vanish into this country better than any living soul. Better than any living soul. But one, Cora said, Vane turned and looked at her. I taught her half of everything she knows about this country, Cora said, and her old voice was steady now, steady and grim. So I know the half she doesn't. Whatever ground she thinks makes her safe, whatever hidey hole she's run to, the odds are good I showed it to her myself once, on some summer hike 7 years gone, which means I know its weaknesses same as I know its strengths. You want to find Freda Voss. She squared her old bent shoulders and stood up straight. Then you need the one woman on God's earth who taught Freda Voss. And there is only the one of those left living. They laid it all out that afternoon, under the lamp, in the back room of the sheriff's office, with the snow ticking soft against the one window, every place Cora had ever hiked with Freda Voss in those 2 glad summers. Every high spot they had talked of over a shared canteen. Every scrap and shred of the young woman's fondness for the far and lonely reaches of the country that Cora could dredge up out of 7 years' distance. Vane sat across from her and wrote it all down, and asked her small, sharp questions, slowly between the two of them, a shapy form. She loved the remote places, Cora said, more than anything. The country where a body could walk a whole long day and never once cut another soul's track. She used to say that was where she felt most herself, most free. Away from people, away from town and talk and the eyes of folks. Did she have a favorite? Vane asked. One place above the others. Cora closed her eyes, went back 7 years and reached for it. There was a place, she said slowly, feeling her way. Up north. 15 miles or so as the country lies, more as you'd have to walk it. A little lake, high up, cold, fed straight off the snowmelt from the peaks above. Crystal Lake. The old-timers named it, though it's on no map I ever saw. You can't get to it but by the one trail, and even that one you have to know, or you'll wander past it and never find the water at all. She talked about that lake more than anywhere on this earth, called it her sanctuary, her one true private place, she used to say. And Cora opened her eyes. There's an old miner's watch shack stands up above it, on the shoulder of the ridge overlooking the water. A silver outfit threw it up 20-odd years back to keep a lookout over their diggings and their equipment, and then left it to rot when the vein pinched out and they pulled up stakes. It stands high. You can see 40 miles from the little cab at the top. See a rider coming from the very moment he starts up the far side of the mountain. Vane went still. "A place to watch from," she said. "A place to watch from," said Cora, and her stomach turned cold as she followed the thought all the way down. "And a place to keep somebody, where you'd have half a day's clear warning before any living soul could reach you. And that, more than the cold, more than the snow, more than anything, was the thing that had begun to gnaw at Cora, down in the deep place where her instincts lived. Because Freda Voss was not simply hiding. A body that is only hiding, runs, keeps running, puts miles and mountains and rivers between itself and the men who hunt it, and never stops looking back over its shoulder. That is what hiding is. But Freda Voss had not run, not once in 5 long years. Freda Voss had drawn a careful map with fresh notes on it from this very spring and left it tucked behind a stove where it might one day be found. Freda Voss had stayed all this while, in the one country in all the world where she was surest to be caught in the end, which meant she was not hiding at all. Which meant she was waiting for what? Cora could not for the life of her say. And it was that question, more than the cold seeping through the walls, fought than her aching old bones, that kept her staring up into the black that night, with Boone breathing slow and warm at the foot of her bed, and the snow piling soft and patient against her window. Closing the mountain a little more with every hour, they moved 2 days later, and they moved on the watch shack first. Not the lake, because Cora had sat up half of one of those nights with the second map spread under her lamp, and she had puzzled at a mark on it she had near about missed the first 3 times over. A star, small, set apart from all the rest, way up high on the shoulder of the divide. And she had stared at the charcoal of that little star until her eyes burned. Slow, the answer had come to her, cold and sudden and certain. That star is newer than the rest of the map. She told Vane at dawn, jabbing at it. Look close at the charcoal of it. It's darker, blacker, less smudged with handling. It was drawn last after all the rest, which means it is the newest of which means she looked up. It is where they are now. We hit the shack first, Vane, not the lake. The shack. I would stake my very life on it. And she was staking more than her own life, and she knew it, standing there in the gray dawn. She was staking 2 girls' lives on the darkness of a charcoal star. She was old, and she might be wrong. And if she was wrong, they would lose a day. And a day was everything now, with the deep snow coming. She knew all of it, and she said it anyway. Because 30 years of reading this country had earned her the right to trust her own gut when at last it spoke to her plain. The tower, Vane said, meaning the shack, the way the men had all taken to calling it. She looked at Cora a long, hard, measuring moment, and then she nodded, once. All right, we trust your gut. The tower first. They rode out inside the hour. A bigger party this time, the biggest yet. Vane, the 2 deputy marshals, Amos, who could no more have stayed behind than he could have stopped his own heart from beating. Charlie Pike, keeping close. 2 more riders who knew the high country and could be trusted in a hard place. And Cora. And Boone. The trail up the ridge to the watch shack was everything Cora remembered of it, and worse besides, because she had climbed it once before in her life. 25 years back, when she was strong and quick and near about fearless. And she had come down off it that day, swearing before God she would never climb the wretched thing again, because it was a pure killer of a trail, all switchbacks stacked on switchbacks and loose sliding rock and narrow knife-edged spines, with the whole world falling away sheer on both sides into nothing. And that had been in high summer, on dry rock, at 38 years of age. And now there was snow on it, and now she was 63, she climbed it anyway. Boone went on ahead of her the whole long way up. Sure-footed as a goat where the men behind him slipped and cursed and grabbed at the rock, finding the one good line through the snow where human eyes saw nothing but white on gray on white. And Cora kept her eyes fixed on his black and tan haunches moving steady up ahead of her, and she put one old boot in front of the other, and she did not once look down at the drop, and she did not stop. 3 miles up the killing trail, Boone stopped cold. Not the slow gathering wrongness he had shown down at the cabin, the hackles rising by degrees. This was all at once. This was a dog turned to stone between one stride and the next. He froze mid-step with one forepaw still lifted off the snow, his whole body gone rigid as iron, his ears jammed hard forward, and a low sound started up deep in his chest, a sound down under hearing near about, a sound Cora had heard maybe 3 times in 3 whole years of walking with him. She put her flat hand up in the air behind her without a word, and the whole strung-out line of men on the narrow trail went still as the rock they stood on. A marshal crept forward, careful of the drop, to where the dog stood pointing with his whole locked body, and knelt down in the snow. "Tracks," he said low. "Small, fresh. 2 days, maybe less, under the new snow. Same as we cut at the cabin, heading up. Same way we're going," they went on slower now. Every nerve in every man drawn and tight as a fiddle string, and a half-mile further up, it was not the dog that stopped them at all. It was a thing set out deliberate, plain for the finding. A little cairn of stones stacked beside the trail. Too neat, too purposeful to be any work of the mountains. And tucked down among the stacked stones, half hid, a scrap of something that caught the corner of Cora's sharp old eye as she came up on it. She stopped, she crouched, and she worked it free with the tip of her staff, would not lay a finger on it. Half a necklace. Cheap. The kind of thing a girl buys for a few pennies at the mercantile in town, or trades a friend for a hair ribbon. A little heart of stamped brass, broken clean down the middle, and pressed into the metal, on the half that lay there in the snow in front of her, a single word. Friends. And Cora knew. The way you know a thing in your bones before your head catches up, the other half of that little brass heart, wherever it was, would say best. She was already digging in her coat for the case papers Vane had given her leave to carry up the mountain. She thumbed through them fast, fingers clumsy in the cold, and she found it. A likeness from the first search, 4 years gone. Delia Hartwell's few poor belongings laid out on a bed for the photographer. And there, in a small framed photograph pinned to the wall above the bed, the two girls stood together, arms around each other, squinting and smiling in some long Ago summer sun, and around each of their two thin necks. "A friendship necklace," Cora breathed out. She held the paper up. They wore them always. Each girl had the one half. "Effie and Delia, look here." She looked up from the paper, and something fierce and bright and terrible had come up into her old gray eyes. "Delia's leaving us a trail, Vane. Same as at the cabin, the broken branch. She's dropping us crumbs. She is alive. And she is telling us, plain as she can, which way they've gone." "She's alive," Vane said. And for one instant the deep stillness broke clean off the woman's hard face, and Cora saw the person underneath it. And it lit a fire in the whole party, that broken brass heart. They moved faster. Cora's own bone-deep weariness burned off her like morning fog off the water. Because those two girls were up there, right up there ahead of them, close now, alive. Dropping their crumbs along the trail like the lost children in the old, old story, praying with everything left in them that somebody, anybody, up the mountain behind, and somebody was. The watch shack rose up out of the trees an hour further on. A tall, gaunt wooden thing, set up on long legs on the very shoulder of the ridge, with a little enclosed cab at the top of it, and a rickety outside stair zigzagging up one side. A stair that looked like it might fold up and die if a man breathed on it too hard. The whole gray-weathered structure was split and warped with 20 years of mountain weather, and half of it looked ready to come down in the next hard wind. But there was a thin blue thread of it, straight up in the still cold air from a stovepipe that poked out through the roof of the cab. Some body was up there. The party spread out silent through the trees around the base of the tower, took cover behind the trunks. The two gunned into position with their long guns laid across fallen logs, covering the stair and the door. And then Margaret Vane stepped clear of the trees, out where she could plainly be seen from above, and cupped her two hands around her mouth. "You in the tower," she called up, and her voice rang flat and hard across the snow. "Federal marshals, we know you're up there. Come down. Come to the door and show us your hands. Nobody up here needs to get hurt today." Silence. The long ringing silence of the high country. Then movement. A shadow passing quick behind one of the small grimy windows of the cab high above. "We only want to talk," Vane called up. "Just talk. Come to the door." More silence. Cora stood pressed behind the trunk of Big Fur, with her heart slamming like a hammer against her ribs, and Boone crowded hard against her leg, whining low and steady in his throat, wanting to go forward, held back by her hand in his ruff. And then up above, the cab door creaked open, and a man stepped out onto the high landing at the top of the swaying stair. He was maybe 35 years of age. Thin as a fence rail, thin as a starved thing. Bearded, the beard grown wild and matted. dressed in worn outdoor clothes, gone gray and stiff with dirt and long wear. His two hands were up in the air where they could be seen, and empty. "Don't come no closer," he shouted down at them, and his voice cracked and broke with disuse, the voice of a man who did not often speak aloud. "This here is private ground. You are trespassing." "This is federal land," Vane called back up, flat and certain, "and we are investigating the taking of two your young girls 4 years gone. What is your name?" "A long one." And then the man called down, Silas Kroll, and from behind his own tree, low and hard, Amos Doyle's voice came to Cora's ear. "That's him. That is the drifter. That is the very man we crossed off the list 4 years back. That's Silas Kroll, Mr. Kroll," Vane called up. "We are coming up those stairs. You can make this easy, or you can make it hard, your choice. But we are coming up." "You can't." Kroll started, and his cracked voice climbed toward panic. "You got no right, you can't just." And then a sound cut him off clean. A sound that stopped every beating heart in that snowy clearing dead cold. A girl's voice, from inside the tower. High and cracked and frantic with sudden desperate hope. "Help. Please. We're in here. We're up here. Help us." And everything came apart at once. The two marshals broke from cover and went up at that rotten stair 2 steps at a time. Weight and danger be damned, the whole gaunt tower groaning and swaying under them. Kroll spun on the landing to bolt back inside and slam the door, but a marshal was already at the top, already through, already driving him back hard against the wall. Cora heard the scuffle of it, the shout, the crack of a body slammed against old wood. And then Silas Kroll came back out that door in irons, his hands wrenched and bound behind him, hauled bodily down that swaying stair, and the whole time he was snarling and spitting his poison, his madness about the corruption of the world and the salvation of the innocent and the sins of a fallen age. But Cora Alden was not looking at him. Not at all. Cora was looking at the tower door above, because 2 more marshals came ducking out through it now. And each of the 2 men had his arm wrapped careful around a girl. They were thin. God above, they were thin. Thin past anything Cora had braced herself to see. Their clothes hung off them like rags hung on sticks. Their hair was long and matted and dull. Their faces were gray as tallow, and their eyes were too big, far too big for the wasted faces that held them. They moved slow and weak and careful, leaning their whole slight weight on the men who held them up, blinking and flinching in the flat white glare of the open sky, like 2 creatures dragged up sudden out of the deep ground into a light they had near about forgotten. But they were on their feet. They were walking. They were breathing the cold, clean mountain air. They were alive. Effie Barrow. And Delia Hartwell. After 4 years, 3 months, and 17 days under the mountain, alive, and Cora Alden's old knees simply gave way beneath her. She sat down hard in the snow, right there where she stood. She could not have kept her feet if the whole tower had come down on top of her. And the tears came up and out of her from a place 4 years deep and 4 years frozen, breaking loose all at once. And Boone was at her, licking at her face and her hands and whining, and she could not move and she could not speak, and she could not do one single thing in all the world but look and look and look. Josiah Barrow's daughter was alive. Eamon Hartwell was alive. The 2 girls that Cora Alden had stood in the snow and sworn to 2 broken fathers she would find. The 2 girls she had promised the mountain out loud in the dark that it would not keep one more winter. Here they came, down off the mountain. At last, a live Vane crossed to her through the snow, and Margaret Vane, who did not traffic in warmth, who was still and hard all the way down to the bottom of her, had 2 bright tears standing confrozen on her own weathered face, and did not trouble to wipe them. "You did it," Vane said. Low, rough. "Your gut, your dog, your 30 years on this mountain." Boone found them. Cora got out. She could hardly shape the words, and they found their own selves. The necklace, the crumbs, Delia. It was all of us. It was all of us together. "Come," said Vane, and she reached down and took Cora's arm in a strong grip and hauled the old woman up out of the snow onto her shaking legs. "They're asking for you, both of them." Come Cora came, on legs gone to water, across the trampled snow to where the 2 girls now sat, wrapped in the wool blankets the marshals had brought, a man's canteen going from hand to hand, and Effie Barrow's ruined gray face turned up to her, and it broke wide open. "Miss Alden," Effie said, "from the wilderness class. It's you." Cora could not answer her. She could only nod and go down again, this time on purpose, on her knees in the snow before them. "You found us," Effie said, and her thin, cracked voice went all to pieces. "We heard the search parties, years back, in the first days. We heard the men calling, and the dogs. We tried to signal. We screamed till we bled, so many times, but he—" Her huge eyes cut sideways to where they were loading Silas Kroll into a wagon. "But he never let us. He was always there, but we knew. We always knew somebody would come for us in the end. We never once stopped believing it. We knew." And Delia Hartwell reached out from inside her blanket and took Cora's old brown hand into both of her own two thin, cold ones and gripped it. The girl did not say a word. She could not, maybe. But her grip was fierce and desperate and shaking, and it said every single thing that no voice on earth could have said. "You're safe now," Cora managed to tell them. "Both of you. You are safe. You are going home." And then Effie began to cry. Not the light, quick tears of a girl. The deep, racking, whole-body fobby sobbing of a soul at last setting down a weight it has carried too long and too far and thought it would carry to its grave. And Delia broke and joined her. And Cora Alden knelt down there in the snow between the two of them and put one arm around each pair of feet, thin, shaking shoulders, and gathered them in and held them hard. While they ebbed out 4 years of the dark. "Your father is waiting," Cora told Effie, soft into her matted hair. "He never gave you up. Not for one single day in 4 years. Not for 1 hour." Effie nodded against her shoulder, weeping. And then Cora drew back and looked at Delia, and her old heart broke clean in half in her chest. Because there was a thing this girl had to be told, and it was cruel past bearing, and it could not wait, and there was no gentle way under heaven to say it. "Your father is waiting too, child," she said. "He never stopped either. But there are hard things to talk of when you're stronger." Delia's grip on her hand went tight, and the girl spoke, for the first time, her voice a dry rasp, a ruin from 4 years of near silence in the dark. "My mama," she said, and Cora Alden closed her eyes. This was a thing for later, for quiet rooms and gentle hands, and slow, careful words, and someone wiser than an old trail woman. But the girl had asked. She had asked it plain, and Cora did not lie to its soul who needed the truth. She never had. She would not begin now, on her knees in the snow, with this child's cold hand in hers. "I'm sorry, sweetheart," she said, and she made herself hold the girl's huge eyes while she said it. "Your mama passed 2 winters back now, but your father, Delia. Your father never once stopped looking. Not for a single hour." Delia's wasted face crumpled in on itself, but she did not cry out. She only nodded, slow, as though some thin thread that had run between a mother and a daughter had quietly gone slack. 2 winters back, way up in the frozen dark, and the girl had felt it snap somewhere down inside her, and had never once let herself believe the truth of it until this very moment, here, in the snow, in the light, in Cora Alden's arms. The doctors came for them then, that had ridden up behind the party. They took the 2 girls, gentle, and got them wrapped warmer and lifted them careful into a covered wagon for the long, slow, careful haul back down the mountain to the town, where warm beds and hot broth and their waiting fathers were. Cora stood back and let them go, and watched the wagon start down, and felt something in her chest that had been frozen solid for 4 long years begin, at the very last, to crack and thaw and run. "One's missing," Vane said. "Come quiet to stand at Cora's side." Cora turned third hand, said Vane. "Freda Voss. She's not here, and she's not been here recent by the cold cinders in that cab stove." Vane looked away north, past the peaks, toward the frozen lake, 15 hard miles off through the deepening snow. "Kroll and his sister. We'll have the both of them behind bars by nightfall. But Voss." Her jaw set hard. "Voss knew we were coming for her, and Voss has gone to ground in her sanctuary. And they did take Ruth Kroll that same afternoon before the sun was well down. She had made one small mistake, the way even careful folk will in the end. She had gone down to buy supplies at a stage station away in the low country, and paid the man with a banknote, and the station keeper had marked her strange face and remembered it, and a rider had carried the word. They took her without a fight. She wept the whole while. She would not say one word. But they had her, and the door of a cell shut behind her, 2 down, 1 yet to go, and the 1 yet to go was the dangerous one. Because Freda Voss knew this high country the way Cora Alden knew it, deep in the bone, and because Freda Voss had not run when she could have run, Freda Voss had waited. And a thing that waits, Cora knew, is a thing that has made itself a plan. "I'm going up to the lake," Cora told Vane that night, in the warm back room of the sheriff's office, with the two sleep beds 2 doors down under the doctor's eye, and the whole little town of Elkridge lit up window by window like Christmas morning with the pure unlooked-for joy of it. And you are coming with me. But when we get up there, Vane, let me go to her first. Alone. No, said Vane, flat as a slammed door. She knows me, said Cora. She helped keep 2 children in a hole in the ground for 4 years, said Vane. Whatever she was to you, 7 summers made back on some pretty ridge. That woman is dead and gone. What's up at that lake now is something else. Maybe so, said Cora. Or maybe I am the last soul left on this earth that she will still open a door to. You send your marshals in at her, with their guns drawn and their voices hard, and she runs, or worse than runs. But you send a old woman she once loved, that once taught her to read the mossy side of a tree. And maybe, just maybe, she stops running, looked at her a long, hard while across the lamplit table, weighing it, weighing the whole cold arithmetic of it if it goes wrong up there, Vane said at last. Then your men move in, said Cora, fast. And you'll not hear one word of argument from me, but give me the first word, just the first word. I have earned that much off this mountain, I believe. And Vane could not argue that. Not truly. Nobody there could have. You'll wear a wire, Vane said at last. A line run back to us in the trees. We hear every word that passes up there. And the moment, the very second, it turns bad. We are coming through that door. Agreed. Agreed, said Cora. They went up 2 days later, in a dawn the raw, dead color of ash. The snow had held off just long enough to let them go, but only just. The sky away to the west was one great spreading bruise, purple one land. The wind coming down off the peaks had a new and wicked edge to it, a knife edge. And Cora had lived 30 years in this country, and she knew to the marrow of her old bones what that sky and that wind were saying. The deep snow was coming soon, coming to close the mountain for the whole long winter. This was the last open window in the wall of the year, and Cora could feel it, plain as the cold on her face, beginning to swish. Approach to Crystal Lake was every bit as murderous as she had warned them it would be. They came up the bed of the frozen creek, because it was the one and only way to come up on that water unseen from the high watching ground above. It added long miles to the way. It meant scrambling over ice-slicked rock and roping one another up the faces of near vertical falls where the summer creek would tumble. Cora's every muscle screamed at her, and her old knees were 2 coals of fire, and more than once she thought her heart would simply burst in her chest and be done. But Boone found the line up through it, always the line, and she followed the dog, and she did not stop. And she did not once ask them to wait on her. And in the late gray afternoon, with the light already beginning to fail, and the first flakes of the coming storm sifting down, they came up at last over a final shoulder of black stone, and there below them lay the lake. Still and dark and flat as beaten pewter under the lowering sky, ringed all around with black timber and gray cliffs of granite, and there, away on the far shore, half hidden back in the old-growth firs, a cabin, not a foundation, not a ruin, a cabin, small and low and solid, built up new from local timber and rough stone, and smoke rising thin blue from its stone chimney, standing up straight for a moment and then torn away sideways by the rising wind. She built it, Cora said, low, almost to herself. She built the whole of it with her own 2 hands, off the old foundation she found. She's been living up here, years by the look of it. There's a garden plot under the snow there, a water catch off the roof. Something in Cora's own chest, twisted hard and cold. She didn't just hide up here all this while, Vane. She made herself a home. They watched from the covered perimeter a long, cold while. And once, only once, they saw her, a figure crossing behind the one small window, a woman, dark-haired, slight. Frida Voss. Vane fixed the wire in under Cora's heavy coat and checked the line back to the trees where her marshals lay hidden. You're sure of this? Vane said. One last time. No, said Cora, but I am going anyway. She left Boone behind with young Charlie Pike. Over the dog's whole shivering objection, his low protest, he stepped clear of the black timber out into the open snow and started across the bare white ground toward the little cabin on the far shore. Her 2 hands hung loose and open and empty at her sides. In plain and full view, every single step of that long walk was open and exposed, and she knew it in her bones, and she knew that behind that one dark window there might be a rifle laid across a sill and sighting steady on her old heart. and she walked out anyway. Freda, she called, when she had come to within 50 yards of the door. It's Cora. It's Cora Alden. I've come up all this way to talk to you. Nothing, only the wind rising. She kept walking. Freda, I know what happened. I know all of it now, about the girls, about Kroll, about every part of it, and her voice carried flat and clear across the frozen face of the lake. But I know you too, Freda. I knew you once. I know the young woman who loved this country better than her own life, who wanted nothing on earth but to teach children to love it too. Come out. Come out here and talk to me. And the cabin door swung slowly open, and Freda Voss stepped out into the failing gray light, and Cora Alden's breath stopped dead in her throat, because the bright young woman she had known and taught and loved was gone, wholly gone. What stood there in the low doorway was a wraith, a haunt, thin down to the bone and past it. The dark hair she remembered gone through now with wide streaks of premature gray, and the eyes. Those warm, kind, gentle eyes that Cora had looked into over a shared canteen on a high summer ridge. They were hollowed out now, scoured empty, and then filled again with something Cora could not name. Grief, or madness, or the two of them twisted so tight together that no living soul could ever pull them apart again. And in her right hand, hanging low at her side, a knife. You shouldn't have come up here, Cora, Freda said, and her voice was rusty and cracked as an old iron gate left too long in the weather. This is my sanctuary. This is the one last place left in all the whole rotten world where I am not a monster. You are not a monster, Cora said, and God help her, she did not know if she believed her own words. You are a soul that took to terrible wrong turning, a long way back. But it is not too late even now. It is not too late to turn back, Freda laughed. A dry, dead, bottomless sound with no floor under it at all. Back, she said. Turn back to what? To a rope around my neck. To rot out what's left of my days in a stone cell. And for what? For trying to save two innocent girls from a rotten, poisoned, murdering world. You didn't save them, Cora said, and she made her old voice hard. You imprisoned them, in the dark, in the cold. You stole 4 whole years clean out of their young lives. I protected them, Freda said, and her voice climbed, thin and shaking and wild. Silas showed me the truth of it. He showed me how the world eats its own young, how it grinds all the innocence out of them and leaves them hollow. We were giving Effie and Delia a pure life up here, a clean life, close to the good ground, close to the true things. Away from all of it, is that the tale you tell yourself, Cora said, and she took one slow, careful step closer through the snow, in the dark, up here, alone. Because the Freda Voss that I knew and taught would have laid down and died before ever she locked a child away in a hole in the ground. That Freda would have died first. That Freda was a fool, the woman said. Bitter as green walnut. She thought she could mend the whole broken world from inside a one-room schoolhouse with a slate and a bit of chalk. Silas showed me the world can't be mended at all. It can only be fled from. Silas Kroll is a stark raving madman, Cora said. Hard now, certain. He got his hands on your grief, girl, somehow, and he took it and he twisted it into this. I know grief, Freda, hear me. I have buried a husband in the cold ground. I have all but buried my own only daughter, to distance and to pride and to 1,000 miles and my own stubborn, foolish heart. I know down to the bone how grief hollows a person out, and I know how a clever, cruel, patient man can find that hollowed place in a body and pours poison down into it. She held the woman's ruined eyes fast with her own. So what was it, Freda? What did he find in you to work his poison on? Because there was something. There was always something. Tell me what it was. And Freda Voss's whole face broke apart. For one raw, terrible, naked moment, the wraith was gone, and the woman was there again. The young woman with the warm and gentle eyes. And what came pouring up out of her then was not madness at all. It was the oldest and the deepest pain there is in all the world. I had a child, Freda said. The knife trembled and shook in her hand. Before ever I came here to your mountains. Up north, in Wyoming. A little girl, she was 3 years old. Freda's cracked voice sank down to a whisper the wind near about tore away. There came a fever through, one spring. And I did everything. Do you hear me? I did every single thing right. Everything there was to do. And she died anyway. She died in my arms in the night, 3 years old. And then the sun came up the next morning, and the whole world just kept on turning, as though my little girl had never once drawn a breath in it, as though she had never been at all. Cora stood very still in the falling snow. I came down here to your country to start again, Freda said. to be near to children again, to pour into some other children all the love I had saved up and could never now give to her. And then I met Silas Kroll. And he told me, he said the world would only take them too in the end. Every child. It takes them all in the end, one way or another. It corrupts them, or it kills them with a fever in the spring, or it just grinds them down slow to nothing at all. And the only way, he said, the only sure way in all the world to keep a child safe was to take that child clean out of the world entire. The tears ran down through the hollows of her wasted face. And God forgive me, Cora, God forgive me. In my grief, in my madness. That made a kind of sense to me. Cora's own old eyes had filled and spilled over because she saw it now. The whole terrible shape of the thing entire at last. A mother driven mad with a grief past bearing. A potent monster who knew exactly where in her to pour his poison down. And two young girls who had paid the whole cost of it with forced stolen years of their lives. But that was not the whole of the shape, because there was one thing in it that did not fit. One thing that Cora's old scout's mind, that never rested, that never once stopped turning things over, had chewed at the whole long murderous climb up the creek bed, and she asked it now. Soft, gentle, Freda, she said. The girls are alive. I know it, Freda whispered. Years, said Cora, in a cave, in a cabin, in a rotting tower, half-starved, weak, cold to the bone, but alive, Freda. Both of them, both girls, all 4 years. And she took another day slow through the snow. That does not happen by accident. Not up here. Not in this country. Not for 4 winters running. Somebody kept those two girls alive. Freda said nothing at all, but her whole thin body had begun to shake. Somebody left them food, Cora said. Quiet, when it ran low and Silas didn't care. Somebody broke his snares and his deadfalls before they could spring. Somebody gave those 2 girls just enough slack in the rope to keep on hoping. That little brass necklace up on the trail, Freda. Delia dropped that, yes. But somebody, all these years, made sure that Delia still had the wit left in her, and the will, and the heart, to think of dropping it. Somebody kept those 2 girls human up here. When Silas Kroll was working night and day to break them down into animals. She was close now. 10 feet, no more. Somebody kept them alive, and the knife slipped from between Freda Voss's fingers and fell soundless into the snow. I couldn't get them out, she said, and now she was sobbing, the whole of her folding and caving in on itself. I was in too deep, don't you see? I had helped him take them. I had drawn the maps with my own hand. If I set them free, I hanged for it, same as him and Silas. Silas would have known in a heartbeat it was me. He'd have. You don't know what he. So I couldn't set them free, but I couldn't. Oh God, Cora, I could not let them die up here either. So I fed them when Silas forgot to. I loosened the ropes when he pulled them cruel. I broke his snares, and I whispered to Delia. In the dark when he wasn't near, I told her, leave a mark if he ever moves you. Somebody is still looking for you. Somebody is still out there. She looked up, ruined, streaming, at Cora. I couldn't save them. I was too weak and too far gone and too afraid. So I just kept them breathing, year after year, and I prayed. I prayed every single night that somebody better than me would come. And Cora Alden stood there at the frozen edge of Crystal Lake. In the failing light, in the first hard flakes of the coming storm. And she looked at the wreck and ruin of the young woman she had once loved, and taught to read this country. And she understood at last that she was looking straight at the reason those 2 girls were alive. The whole reason her long and terrible errand had come out at last into the light, and not the dark, a murderer, a jailer, and, at the very last, against everything, a keeper. All 3 of them together in one poor broken shaking body. Come down the mountain with me, Freda, Cora said, gentle now. All the hardness gone out of her. You cannot ever undo the taking. That's done, and it will be with you till you die. But you can tell the truth of it now. You can give those 2 girls the answers they are going to need to mend. You are the only living soul who come down. Silas never will. Come down. Come down and tell it true. I can't face them, Freda whispered. I can't face what I did to them. You have to, Cora said, because they deserve the whole of it, every part, and because you kept them breathing all these years when nobody else on earth would. And because somewhere down under all this ruin and all this madness, the Freda Voss I knew is still in there. I can see her. I'm looking at her right now. She's the one who kept those girls alive. And Cora Alden held out her old, brown, empty hand across the snow. Let her come down off this mountain now. For a long, long moment, Freda Voss stood frozen in the doorway of the little home she had built with her own hands to hide inside of it. Then she took one step and then another, and she came out from the doorway into the falling snow, her two empty hands hanging open at her sides, weeping and saying over and over, so soft that Cora had to strain to catch it under the rising wind, "I'm sorry. God forgive me. I'm so sorry." The marshals came in out of the timber then. Quick, quiet, careful. They took her without any violence at all, because there was no violence left anywhere in her to take. They said the churches over her, and they bound her hands, and she did not once resist them or pull away. And Cora watched the whole of it from 10 feet off, feeling I wrung out and emptied to nothing at all. "You brought her in," Vane said. Come quiet to Cora's side, without one shot fired, without one soul hurt on this mountain. Cora, that took more true sand than most men I've known ever had in them. She's the reason those girls lived, Cora said. Numb, empty, whatever else she did up here, and it was black, and she'll answer for it. She is the reason those two girls are alive to go home. I heard, Vane said, and she touched the wire hid under her own coat. I heard every word of it, up there in the trees, and the court will hear it too, every word. It won't save her from a cell, Cora. Nothing on earth can do that now. But it will be told. She will get that much. She earned that much. And then the storm came down. It came all at once, the way the high country storms do, with no more warning than that bruised sky and that knife-edge wind. The wind rose up to a full shriek, and the snow came slashing sideways in a blind white roar, and they got themselves down off that mountain in the very teeth of it. Freda Voss, walking bound between two marshals, and Cora Alden bent double into the wind, with Boone pressed hard and warm against her leg the whole long way. And behind them, as they went, the white door of the winter slammed shut on Crystal Lake and did not open again for 5 long months. They had gotten out with hours to spare. Only hours. The trial came the following spring. On a raw April morning down in the county seat, with the last of the snow melting off the high peaks and running high and brown and roaring in every creek and gully, they tried the 3 of them together. Silas Kroll, Ruth Kroll, Freda Voss. The charges against them filled a whole page and then some. Kidnapping, false imprisonment, cruelty to children, conspiracy. And the evidence stacked it against them was a mountain in itself, because Margaret Vane had built it up stone by careful stone all through the long winter, and there was no man living could climb over it. They called Cora Alden to the witness stand on the 3rd day, and she told it all, plain and flat, keeping to the facts and leaving the feeling out of it, because the facts alone were more than enough and did not need any dressing. And when she was done, Freda Voss's lawyer rose up to cross-examine her. A smooth man, soft-spoken, sympathetic in all his manner, and he came at her sideways, the way such men do. "You knew my client," he said gently. 7 years ago. I did. You taught alongside her in a wilderness class for children. I did. You shared a great deal of your own hard-won knowledge with her, Miss Alden. Did you not? The trails, the hidden places, the survival craft, the very symbols used on those terrible maps. And Cora felt the floor of the thing open up beneath her feet. I shared what was fit for the teaching of children, she said. In fact, he said, softer still, and more terrible for the softness, the very country where those 2 girls were held, the caves, the old cabin, the lookout tower. You showed all of it to my client, with your own hand. Did you not? We hiked in those regions together, Cora said. Lo, so it would be fair to say, would it not, that by sharing your lifetime of expertise so freely with Freda Voss, you yourself gave her the very tools and the very knowledge that were later used to commit this crime. The prosecutor was up out of her chair. Objection. Counsel is bad entering this witness and attempting to shift the whole blame from his own client onto the very woman who solved this case and brought those girls home alive. Sustained, said the judge. Move along, counselor. But the thing was said. It was out and loose in the room. And it was the very thing, the exact thing, that had haunted Cora Alden through 4 sleepless winter nights, spoken now aloud in an open court for the whole valley to hear. She had taught her the marks. She had shown her the country. She had, without ever once meaning to, without ever dreaming of it, forged half the very tools of the evil she had then spent a whole winter of her old age fighting to undo. And for one long moment the old guilt reared up in her, huge, like drowning, and then she raised her head, and she found Freda Voss's eyes across the crowded courtroom, and Freda mouthed two silent words to her across all that distance. "I'm sorry." And something in Cora Alden settled, and went still, and was at last at peace, because the smooth lawyer had it exactly backwards, and she knew it now, clean and sure, all the way down. Knowledge was not the crime. She had given Freda Voss the very same craft, out of the very same love, that she had given to 100 bright-eyed children in that summer class. And 99 of those 100 children had grown up straight and true, to hunt and to ranch, and to raise up their own babies, and to love this hard country the honest way. One single one of them had taken that gift and turned it to darkness. And that was not the fault of the craft, nor of the love that gave it, nor of the old woman who taught it. That was the fault of the one soul who chose the darkness, and of the madman who led her down into it by the hand, and of no one else in all the wide world. And as she stepped down from the stand, Cora did not look away from Freda Voss. She held the woman's ruined eyes the whole long way past the defense table, and she gave her one small nod. It was not forgiveness. Forgiveness was not Cora's to give, not for this, but it was something. It was an acknowledgment. Silence between the two of them. You kept them alive. I have not forgotten that. I will not ever forget it. The hardest testimony of the whole trial came the day they held Effie Barrow to the stand. A young woman of 21 years now, robbed clean of the 4 years that should have carried her from a girl into a woman. The whole packed courtroom went still and silent as a church. And when the prosecutor asked her, at the last, how in God's name she hadn't suffered 4 years in that place, Effie Barrow turned her head and looked straight at Delia Hartwell, sitting there in the front row beside her broken father. We survived it together, Effie said. Her voice trembled, but it held. We kept the count of the days. We told each other stories, every night, about all the things we would do when we got out, because we would not, either one of us, let the other one stop believing we would get out. And there was a woman, Miss Voss. She had been my own teacher once before, and she was a part of it. And I will never understand that as long as I live, not if I live to be 100 years old. But she was the one who left us food when we were starving, who whispered to us in the dark to keep on hoping, who told Delia to leave a mark if ever they moved us. Effie's eyes went across the room to Freda Voss then, and they were not full of hate. They were full of something far heavier and harder to carry than hate. She helped to take us, Effie said, and she helped to keep us alive. Both of those things, and I do not know how to hold the two of them in the same hand. But they are both of them true. The jury was out 6 hours, and they came back in and they convicted all 3 of them on every single count. The judge gave the 2 Krolls life behind stone walls. He gave Freda Voss life as well. But he read her own testimony into the record first, and the mercy she had shown in the dark, and he said plainly that it would be considered in the years to come, and that was the very most that the law of men could do. Outside the courthouse, in the thin, bright April sun, Effie Barrow stood on the stone steps with Delia Hartwell close beside her, and she said a few words to the gathered town, and she thanked marshals, and she thanked old Sheriff Doyle, and she thanked above and beyond all the rest of them Cora Alden and her dog Boone. Because of them, Effie said, her voice carrying clear across the crowd. We are standing here today, in the sun. We are alive, and we have got our whole lives back. And then Delia Hartwell spoke, quiet, so quiet, but every single soul on those courthouse steps heard every word. To anyone still lost out there, she said, to anyone still in the dark, wherever you are, don't you give up hoping. People are looking for you. People care, and one day you will be free too. And Cora Alden stood at the very back of that crowd, and she did not let one soul there see her weep. The snow was long gone from the low country by the time Cora came home for good. She rode up the last mile of trail in the green flush of the late Colorado spring, with Boone loping easy ahead of her through the new grass, and the aspens all coming into their leaf silver green along the Singing Creek. And there was a letter waiting for her, pinned under a stone on the porch rail, where the mail rider left such things. It had come all the way from San Francisco. Cora's old hands were not quite steady as she broke the seal and unfolded it. Mother, it began. The papers out here carried the whole of your story, what you did, the girls you found and brought home. And Mother, I have read it 100 times over, and each time I understand a little more why you never could bring yourself to leave those mountains. They are a part of you, They always were, and I have been a fool all these 4 long years, trying to pull you up out of the one place on this earth where you are most truly yourself. I am coming home for a visit, in the summer if you will have me. I want to walk your trails with you. I want to meet the dog I sent you all that while ago. That turned out to be the finest thing I ever did for you without the first idea I was doing it. I want to sit on your porch and drink your terrible chicory coffee and listen to the wind you love so well. I have missed you, Mother. I have missed you every single day of these 4 years, and I have been too proud and too much your own stubborn daughter to say it. Your loving daughter, Rachel. And Cora Alden sat down slow on her own porch step, and she read the letter through once more. And Boone came and pushed his big warm head up under her hand and looked at her with those whiskey eyes. And Cora put her old brown hand on the dog's skull, and she wept at long last for something that was not grief. She wept for a thing found, because that, in the end, was the whole of what she had learned. Up there in the high cold country, chasing 2 lost girls through the ruins of that hard winter, that the lost can be found. If somebody, anybody, refuses to quit looking, that hope is not a feeling that comes over a body. It is a thing a body does. Effie and Delia had lived all 4 years because they kept scratching the count into the wall with a burned stick, because they kept dropping their crumbs along the trail, because they refused, down in the very deepest dark, to ever once stop believing that the light was on its way. And Cora had found them because she had done the same, because she had never fully quit looking, not in all those 4 years, even when she told herself over and over that she had. Because a good dog would not let her turn back on a foggy morning. Because when the thing was at last known to her, she did not let herself be old or tired or afraid. The country had kept its dark secret for 4 long years, and then at the last it had given it up into the light. Some things that are lost are meant to be found again, and sometimes an old woman with a good dog on a foggy morning in the last October of a long and lonely grief can change the whole shape of the world, one trail at a time. She stood up from the porch step in the green spring evening and looked out over the mountains, gone all gold and rose now in the last low light of the day. And for the first time in a very long time, they did not look to her like a place that kept dark secrets. They looked like home. "Come on, boy," she said, and reached for her coat off the peg by the door. And the old woman and the good dog stepped out together onto the trail, into the last gathering gold of the evening, walking easy now, the both of them, walking home with nothing lost between them anymore, and the whole quiet mountain, soft to sleep behind them in the coming dusk.